Disclaimer: this translation from Old Latin to Modern English by Christopher Templesage is provided for historical and educational purposes only. The text represents the work of Rudolph Glauber, a figure in the history of chemistry and medicine. It is important to note that this translation does not reflect modern scientific knowledge or understanding, and readers should approach the content with caution and critical thinking. The author and translator make no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of the information contained herein. Readers are encouraged to consult contemporary sources and experts in the relevant fields for updated and accurate information. To the kind reader, various and diverse foods, whether prepared from meat or from fish, though they are considered to be the best, if they are not seasoned with salt and placed on the table, they are commonly reported to bring no pleasure to the palate, as they neither provide a delicate taste, nor contribute to the health of the body. But truly, if this does not exceed this common and banal saying, anyone can easily notice, if they would admit it diligently, if they have weighed it with an accurate mind's eye, that salt holds a prime place among food seasonings, and has no equal, only the sun, so that from all it itself should be preferred. Such a treasure's excellences and wonderful virtues and qualities are most worthy, which can occupy the minds of mortals with unceasing investigation, in the pursuit of which I have decided to dedicate my efforts to this present work, as for 15 or 16 years nothing has been prior and more ancient to me, than to serve with my labors, however they may be, to the divine glory and the public good. 2. Indeed, with my extensive experience, I have brought to light in a series of 5 arts about philosophical furnaces, and I have revealed 5 furnaces adapted to various methods of distillation, and for the preparation of excellent medicines which combat various and diverse diseases afflicting the human body, suitable for preparation by artful processes, which useful and ingenious inventions have not been revealed by anyone before. Followed was the mineral work of minerals and metals, demonstrating their origin and improvement, to which succeeded the spagyric pharmacopoeia treating in 3 parts about vegetables, how medicines from them efficaciously should be prepared. Next was the work about the admirable clear nature and property of salt, in which is solidly demonstrated the true miracle of all salts and their uses, the universal philosophers, serving the use of all men, both the greatest and the lowest, the rich and the poor. I called that work the miracle of the world, increased it with explanations and continuations, and fortified against the nefarious insults of the envious and slanderers with defense and apology. In all these, the miracles of the divine, and the mysteries of nature, and to this world, deeply engaged in great excitement, I have presented. Another treatise followed under the title of The Prosperity of Germany, in 4 booklets, of which 2 later ones have not yet appeared in light, but will do so if God extends my life, encompassing most useful economic, administration of household management principles. Another small work also, titled Consolation for Navigators, teaching how in journeys and long voyages to the East Indies and West Indies, sailors against hunger and thirst, and other such discomforts to which they are usually prone, can defend themselves and remain healthy and safe. Furthermore, a treatise on tartar, vinegar, spirit of wine indicating their easy preparation and preparation. I have added to these the same treatise on potable gold and another on universal medicine or on true potable gold, and other apologetic writings, in which not only the treacherous infidelity of men but also many excellent sciences have been revealed, so that with all these writings I may illuminate the divine glory, and benefit and profit. 3. I would seek my neighbors, and I would serve them as excellent foods, for the sake of nourishing both the soul and the body. And although these foods in their own nature of salt, are healthy and of good taste, if they contain their natural salt, it still seemed worthwhile to me to sprinkle them as if with new salt, and to season them in a certain way, so that they can be tasted with greater appetite and pleasure. And for this purpose and to promote it, I am minded, as I tried diligently to observe the precept of the ancient doctors, that no food should be placed on the table without salt. Indeed, it is an ancient custom that in good household management the salt cellar should be placed first, preceding all other foods, and should not be removed from the table until all other foods have been taken away. This indicates that salt, a most useful and absolutely necessary gift of God, should rightly and deservedly precede the foods placed on the table, and be the last to be removed. But in order for this most noble divine gift to become better known to the group of the ignorant, and more known than before, I cannot refrain from briefly, and as if in passing, as much as the present time allows me, its immense and admirable efficacy, for the benefit of the human race, I shall outline and depict, easily and briefly, I request, let this be attributed to the study of divine miracles and made good, and not to be taken lightly. The rest is found in the writings of other pious and diligent men, burning with a great desire to be known. As far as it concerns the origin of salt, the nourisher and sustainer of the whole earth, which is drawn from the ocean as if from a universal storehouse, differing opinions have arisen, leading writers to various parts and opinions. Some believe that salty springs, which burst forth in many and varied places on earth and express their salt through the benefit of boiling, do not derive their origin from the ocean, but from salt, generated and formed in a peculiar way in many places of the earth's globe, particularly in the form of metals. They establish their opinion with this argument, that the water of these springs exceeds the taste of seawater in saltiness, and on the contrary, when projected through long earthly passages, necessarily loses its saltiness completely, leaving its salt behind, and should emerge entirely fresh or tasteless. This reasoning is so in agreement with the truth. A4. At first glance, it seems that it could hardly be otherwise. Indeed, even the pure springs of fresh water were originally salty, which, penetrating the earth's pathways, deposited their salt to nourish the earth, and then burst forth sweet for the daily use of the human race. Hence, so many and such varied rivers originate, returning again to the sea or ocean, that universal storehouse, from which they continually draw salt in an unending cycle, and communicate the same to the earth, so that in this way it never suffers from a lack of due nourishment, but makes of the same, perpetually, minerals, stones, shrubs, trees, grasses, animals, and even humans partakers, and thus serves for the sustenance, propagation, and conservation of both irrational and rational animals, which no one in possession of reason and mind can deny. Or perhaps someone might want to deny the circulation of human blood in the human body, as in a kind of microcosm, which is unknown to not a few, mostly unrecognized, and say that blood in the smallest finger of the hand or foot, in the earlobe, or in other such parts does not arise from the universal, and as a source of health, but particularly generated and produced in those very places by the vital spirit, which tastes of no small absurdity. Therefore, since the unceasing circulation of blood in the microcosm, as a most true thing, cannot in any way be denied, why not also such circulation in the macrocosm or the orb of the earth, as if it were not admitted by God? Just as the blood of the human body, originating from the liver, spreads through all the channels and veins, both large and small, of the entire body, preserving the life of the whole structure, nourishing and invigorating all parts, leaving behind the better juice, which is transformed into flesh, bones, skin, and hair, in the very members themselves, to nourish and increase them, and expelling useless phlegm through the pores of the skin. So it is compared with the nourishment and sustenance of the entire macrocosm, universally, as that salty water, from the great sea or ocean encompassing the entire terrestrial globe, through many small and large passages, like veins, pervades all parts of the earth, and nourishes and sustains them with its salt. A5. So that minerals, metals, stones, sand, clay, shrubs, trees, and grass may be nourished, grow, and, by growing, yield fruit. This water, once freed from all saltiness, is exterminated as if a kind of fruit and, dispersed into various channels both small and large, is expelled, just as in the microcosm the fruitful yield of blood, through innumerable passages and pores. But as to why in many places on earth salt is not left behind by water but rather produces fruit, this seems entirely likely for various reasons. Firstly, that ancient head of the household, by divine foresight, wisely ordained and established it, looking out greatly for the benefit of humanity, so that such salty water, which men can scarcely use at all, might burst forth from the earth. For this reason, in certain places on the earth, when the salt water passes through the openings, which it does in abundance, it is desiccated by the central fire and coagulates into hard and large lumps. These, once extracted and dug up by human labor, are dissolved with the aid of water and, freed from their impurities, are cooked in foreign containers and turned into pure salt. But if it should happen that another water enters into the terrestrial passages, through which it passes, it produces such lumps of salt. Solidified salt defend itself, only as much as they can carry away with them, and then they are cooked into various forms of salt, depending on how much salt they have brought with them. The fact that this source of salt is richer, and that one is enriched with a smaller quantity, is due to the presence of differentiating water, and the quantity of salt water that accompanies it, which makes it weaker. These few things are sufficient to refute the opinion of those who claim that salt springs do not draw their origin from the sea but are peculiarly excited and born in the earth by some sort of influx of water. Perhaps, if this is also credible, it seems more credible that the sun and the rays of the stars, and their influences, when they descend into the ocean and the seas, generate a filament that subsequently penetrates the permeable channels of the earth, bringing with it the necessary nourishment. The abundance of salt in springs, whether greater or lesser, could be brought about by the fact that these springs, which receive salt water from the sea, differ in their location and differ in their composition from the sea water itself, which varies and differs in many ways. For the closer one gets to the sea, it tends to contain a smaller quantity of salt, often barely 1/10 or 1/20 of the salt's portion. On the other hand, as one approaches the south or the east, it is enriched with a greater quantity of salt. For this reason, in certain parts of eastern and western India, the sea often surges with a great quantity of salt foam due to the violent force of the storms. It casts this foam onto the shores, which is later dried and turned into salt. The inhabitants use this salt for preserving meat and fish. Experience has shown that in such places, 4 pounds of seawater yield 1 pound of salt. The abundant presence of salt is indicative of the fertility of these lands, which, without any human cultivation, provide their inhabitants with the most excellent fruits through constant rains and winter months. Regions very close to the Tropic of Cancer do not enjoy such fertility since they require stronger and more penetrating rays of the sun. They do not yield as much salt and are thus less abundant and spontaneous. Denying the fertility of fruits, however, in order to elevate what they had deemed unworthy to a higher honor, I neither wanted nor could I refrain from the deserved name, and therefore, I named it the greatest treasure of the world and the greatest wealth. I aimed to inscribe this title as a sign of proof and demonstration. Besides this, which is known to everyone, I proclaim common and despised salt, in which the life, preservation, growth, and propagation of all creatures are maintained. It is the beginning and end of all things, and I prove that a greater treasure is not to be found on earth. I do not allow anyone to occupy this title with the opinion of the lowliness of despised salt, nor do I think that by conferring this title and calling it the greatest treasure and greatest wealth of the entire world, I have exceeded bounds and bestowed excessive honors. For rightfully and deservedly, 3 honors in such a title belong to him, so much so that he would need to be further distinguished with an even greater mark. However, I am easily convinced that if they open this booklet driven by a desire for gold, read the title, they will conceive nothing else in their minds than a description of the universal Great One himself or a revelation of immense riches, which they hope to find in this immense treasure, not even dreaming that the despised and contemptible salt is being presented here in their midst. Therefore, they will say, is such a clamor to be raised over a handful of salt? Who would have thought that Glauber would have dared to mark salt with such a title? But, my friend, I insist to you that you patiently read through and carefully examine the things I place before your eyes in this writing, so that you may perceive that I have written pure and true. If the scope of your mind surpasses this, and you have not learned or understood these things from the books of others until now, then I would like this to come to your mind. Not everyone has known everything, and God is omnipotent. He has left many things, which knowledge has swelled with pride, concealed until now. Read and reread the writings of the ancient philosophers, most true, so that you may know, if you understand, those men who, the innermost nature, as if excluding windows, has indeed made salt, but deliberately concealed its mysteries and secrets from the ungrateful world, which it now reveals in the open in these latter times, to be received by you and all others as incomparable gifts with the most grateful mind. Lift your ears, pathophile, open your eyes covered by blindness and darkness, pay attention to the good things that I proclaim to you about salt, and if you dare the experiment and thoroughly examine all, with God, nature, and truth conjoined, I have no doubt that a great light will illuminate your mind and make you like a renewed person. But if, on the other hand, with a proud and lofty spirit, you treat with contempt the same things as if you refuse to learn and understand, you will mock them. You will remain in this crowd of the old and in the same rank and file, and even though Aristotle himself and all professors, if pain should attack your long years like an ass, if you, like an ass, attempt to cover your foolish pride and proud foolishness, it is far better to know many things and measure them by their proper measure than to know nothing and, In the emptiness of your ignorance, pretend to be superior. I have never seen anyone who, having knowledge of the truth, has insulted the fruits of your labor. I have observed that many, driven by excessive envy, hatred, and inhuman malice, often have nothing more important or ancient, and still continue to have, than to persist in mocking those to whom divine benignity has granted its gifts, and they ridicule them. Let them gnash their teeth like Theonon, for the diabolic deed will not go unpunished by divine justice in its own time. I wish you to take this to heart, proud mocker, and pay attention to what I am about to say regarding salt. Treatise on the nature of salts. On the nature of salt, to demonstrate concisely how many great benefits, and if we consider the well-being of our souls, the highest temporal good, the utmost preservation of human health, the greatest wealth, the greatest treasures, and whatever else is necessary for human use, are fully and clearly hidden in such a body as salt, we must first listen to what our Savior, Christ, the very truth, the very light, and the very life, said about salt in the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 14, verse 34, and in the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 9, verse 50. He said, "Salt is a good thing." In Luke chapter 18, verse 19, he also said, "No one is good but God alone." And yet, he calls his disciples the salt of the earth, and he adds that if the salt loses its saltiness, it is useless and cannot bear fruit. He might as well have said, "Salt is the noblest thing in the whole world, and yet it is despised and held in contempt by fools. Be like this salt, and do the will of God, and lead sinners to God as mediators, for it cannot be done any other way." May your head be, I am your master, your predecessor, follow in my footsteps, follow me, I am. These words of our Lord Jesus Christ conceal the greatest mysteries, which people do not consider with due examination, but only glance at superficially and read. But it must be understood that Christ did not speak in vain, and every word that came from his holy mouth is of the utmost importance. He conceals mysteries that not even the 1,000th person can understand, grasp, and believe. Therefore, unless pride, worldly ambition, and vanity, which fill the hearts of people so much that they do not admit anything spiritual and desire it, be abolished, it would be in vain to pour valuable and noble wine into foul-smelling and poisoned water, or pleasant-tasting medicine, as it would not yield its place to the healthy remedy, and the noble juice would perish when mixed with useless corruption. Likewise, in this most ungrateful and perverse world, in which the majority of human hearts, senses, and thoughts are entirely occupied with earthly and perishable things, so that they are unable to receive anything divine, the blame lies with detestable Satan, who has sown such a copious crop of tares in the hearts of people that no place is left for the most useful wheat. If we examine human actions carefully and look at the actions of human beings, we will discover the true situation. Blessed is the one who turns timely to the good harvest and departs from the path of malice. Returning to the subject of salt, let us hear what others have said about it. It is not necessary to quote and cite the writings of philosophers here in lengthy words, as they are readily available, and it is clear to everyone that they esteem salt as the noblest creation after God, the sun, and fire, and accorded it divine honors. The pagans, however, could not work with fire and salt. Reading the Old and New Testament, you will find that God himself commanded salt to be considered. In the Gospel according to St. Mark, it is found that all men should season all sacrifices with salt and offer sacrifices of salt, and a lamp or light should never be extinguished on the altar but kept in continuous burning. In the Christian Church, this custom has always been observed, so that no infant was baptized without the presence of some light or candle. Moreover, a little salt was placed on the mouth of the baptized child, with the words, "Receive salt of wisdom." This means that you should understand and perceive God and not become a worldly beast devoid of reason. These ceremonies have been observed in some places even to this day. The Greek Church baptizes with water and fire, symbolizing by this rite that the Holy Spirit is like fire, for it warms, vivifies, and turns the hearts of men to God. God himself calls himself a consuming fire, and the Holy Spirit always appeared in the form of a fiery tongue, showing himself to the disciples of Christ with tongues of fire. Among the Abyssinians, under the powerful priest King John, salt is B2. Professing the Christian religion in Africa, they baptize with water and fire and mark the foreheads of the baptized with wood. In summary, among the pagans, Jews, Turks, and even the Christians themselves, there is no one who does not highly value fire and salt. However, more than beasts like pigs, cows, or other irrational animals that pass their lives without understanding, humans have not known the true worth of fire and salt. These two creatures of God, namely fire and salt, are one and the same in the foundation of nature. For fire produced salt, and salt in turn returns to fire, so that through their mutual conversion, one is always changed into the other. Therefore, Hermes, the father of all philosophers, said, "That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above," as written in his emerald tablet. The sun, or fire, is above, and salt is below, which, like fuel or fire, is easily rendered combustible, as I have taught in many places in my writings, and all philosophers themselves unanimously acknowledge that the greatest secret hidden in fire and salt lies concealed. Hence, the word alchemy is derived from fire and salt, which penetrate all things, and fire itself is a symbol of God, who has always shown himself in the form of fiery light. Salt, on the other hand, is a symbol of eternity because it preserves and protects everything from corruption. Christ is the light of the world, and his disciples or apostles are called the salt of the earth. If I may, I will demonstrate this clearly and openly. Just as Christ and his disciples, who were the salt of the earth, served as a means for the reconciliation of sinners to God through the expansion of the Holy Gospel, similarly, through the benevolence of the great universal ancient philosophers, reconciliation can occur in human bodies, allowing for a comparison with other factors. For a lost and fallen sinner could not be reconciled to God by any other means except that God would send his word through the Holy Spirit into the body of a human being, namely the Virgin Mary, to become flesh, take on human nature, live, die, and rise again. As John the Evangelist testifies at the beginning of his Gospel, saying, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us," etc., it was necessary for divinity to humble itself, take on human nature, suffer, and rise again before fallen and rejected humanity could be reconciled to God. For in this case, one human could not help another, but a helper was required who, as a participant in both divine and human nature, could, through suffering and making amends for humanity, reconcile humanity with God. Someone may inquire and say, why did God do this, when he could have easily prevented Satan from entering, not allowing the serpent to deceive humanity, and not leading to the fall? In that case, there would be no need for the word of God. But you should know, my dear friend, that God did not desire this. Rather, he allowed what is good and evil for humanity to manifest his omnipotence and reveal his purpose. Why did Satan enter the serpent and use it to tempt humanity to fall? It was so that God could set before us an image of reconciliation. Why did Moses raise a bronze serpent in the wilderness and command the Israelites to look at it when they were bitten by serpents? It was, undoubtedly, to free everyone from the bites of serpents and restore their previous health by that means. It was a foreshadowing of the crucifixion of Christ, who was crucified for us as a curse, so that by invoking him with one accord and in earnest, we might be delivered from the venom and the bite of the infernal serpent, the devil. Similarly, the marvelous medicine of the ancient sages is to be understood in this way, which I could clearly demonstrate through a simple comparison if I were allowed to do so by inexperienced and unjust judges who might misinterpret it. However, to provide some insight, I cannot refrain from touching on a few points. Just as God is eternally immutable and remains so, and after the creation of the world, he formed humanity from the earth and breathed his divine spirit into it, giving life to that earthly mass. Later, he took a rib from them. He transformed the woman into a helper for the man, leading both into paradise and allowing them to eat from the fruit of all the trees except the one tree of the knowledge of good and evil. However, Satan, consumed by envy and hatred for the human race, could not bear the great happiness of humanity. He entered the serpent, deceived Eve, and incited Adam through her to transgress the divine law. Adam, together with his wife, partook of the forbidden fruit and thus cast himself into eternal condemnation, where he would have remained forever unless God, in his mercy, willed to become incarnate through his Spirit in the Virgin Mary, taking on human flesh. He chose to suffer, die, and rise from the dead on the third day, bearing the full burden of Adam and Eve's sins and the sins of all humanity. In doing so, he fully satisfied the sins and reconciled miserable humanity with God. Similarly, the universal medicine of the philosophers transmutes base metals into gold and restores their original health. just as it does in human bodies, recovering lost vitality and reconciling them. It achieves this after his passion and resurrection, leading to the highest perfection. This reconciliation and atonement for the human race is of heavenly origin. As for the universal medicine of the elements, although it is a complex comparison to make, b4, it is comparable and suitable for comparison with the previous discourse, so that even any pagan, Jew, or unbeliever who gains knowledge of this philosophical work will undoubtedly recognize and embrace the true Christian religion. Thus, I am convinced that the ancient Sibyls and various philosophers, who wrote so clearly about God and his Son, would never have done so unless they had knowledge of this philosophical work. Be it as it may, whether they had this knowledge through the revelation of the Holy Spirit or acquired it through the light of nature, they knew well, as their writings testify, that the Trinity and the Triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, exist, even though they did not clearly, distinctly, and perspicuously expound everything pertaining to this knowledge. There is no need to elaborate on this matter further, as I only intended to imply that if any pagan, Jew, or non-Christian possessed the knowledge of true philosophy and had not professed the name of Christ, whether they be a Turk or a Jew or a pagan, their false opinion about God would not persist in their paganism. Instead, upon recognizing the teachings of Christ revealed to them through their conscience, they would renounce their erroneous views and acknowledge and confess Christ. This is beyond any doubt, and it is entirely infallible. For if anyone reads the writings of Moses and the prophets, as well as the New Testament and the writings of the apostles, and compares them with the natural philosophical work, they will find that all these things are so clear and evident. It will inevitably lead those who understand Moses, Christ, and his apostles to such great admiration that it will be impossible for them not to be raptured by those marvelous mysteries of nature, to which God has chosen to manifest himself to the entire world through the gift of the light of nature. To those who truly understand Moses, Christ, and his apostles, there is no need to burden their minds with extensive meditation and multifaceted investigation of this philosophical work. For they will find everything clearly and expressly written in their own writings, especially in the books of Moses, Genesis, and the beginning of the Gospel of John, where the following words should be diligently considered. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, through whom all things were made, and without him, nothing was made that has been made. Although Moses, the prophets, and the apostles primarily spoke about divine matters and taught about the divine, and they were not overly concerned with philosophy or the light of nature, since they were illuminated by the far superior light of Christ, which greatly surpasses the natural light, nonetheless, their writings correspond so precisely to the light of nature that they appear as if they were philosophers and professors of universal medicine by profession. As for why Almighty God permits all these things to happen, it is not for us to dispute. We are directed by sacred scripture towards eternal salvation through the light of nature and towards universal medicine for the knowledge of God and nature. b5. It is necessary that great admiration should arise in the reader of the prophets when they have recorded so many marvelous things in their memory, just as if they were the most learned philosophers and physicists. Hence, it is not unjustifiable for me to believe that the entire nature was revealed before their eyes, for they were endowed with the Spirit of the Holy Spirit, to whom nothing is hidden. Those who consider the evangelist John to have understood Hermetic philosophy and who still sing a hymn composed and sung by the ancient fathers in his honor, in which these words appear, "He makes gold from branches and gems from stones." I leave this judgment to each one's discretion, and I only say this here that the heavenly and earthly mysteries were known and explored by the prophets and apostles. Although I have never undertaken such a great philosophical work, it is nonetheless clear to me from the writings of the prophets and apostles, as well as from the light of nature itself. By comparing the divine and the human, I could easily subject it to my eyes. However, the power to do so has not been granted to me, and therefore, I trust that no one will interpret these few words in a negative way. I look only to the glory of God and the benefit of my neighbor in these writings. There is no need for anyone to seek more among the ancient and modern philosophers, as long as they read and consider the divine scriptures of Moses, the prophets, and the apostles. It is necessary that great admiration should arise in the reader of the prophets when they have recorded so many marvelous things in their memory, just as if they were the most learned philosophers and physicists. Hence, it is not unjustifiable for me to believe that the entire nature was revealed before their eyes, for they were endowed with the Spirit of the Holy Spirit, to whom nothing is hidden. Those who consider the evangelist John to have understood Hermetic philosophy and who still sing a hymn composed and sung by the ancient fathers in his honor, in which these words appear, "He makes gold from branches and gems from stones." I leave this judgment to each one's discretion, and I only say this here that the heavenly and earthly mysteries were known and explored by the prophets and apostles. Although I have never undertaken such a great philosophical work, it is none the less clear to me from the writings of the prophets and apostles, as well as from the light of nature itself. By comparing the divine and the human, I could easily subject it to my eyes. However, the power to do so has not been granted to me, and therefore, I trust that no one will interpret these few words in a negative way. I look only to the glory of God and the benefit of my neighbor in these writings. There is no need for anyone to seek more among the ancient and modern philosophers, as long as they read and consider the divine scriptures of Moses, the prophets, and the apostles. It can never happen that what is transmuted into gold and gems into stones, and although the latter could be somewhat credible due to the relationship between stones and gems, the former, because of the great difference between wood and metals, which belong to different kingdoms, completely exceeds all belief, and other objections of this kind will be raised by the uninitiated due to their external appearance. However, such objections do not evoke any admiration, much less doubt, among philosophers, as they themselves do not evade how great a relationship exists between the vegetable kingdom and the mineral kingdom, which both indeed originate from the same subjects, namely water, salt, and fire, which their anatomy demonstrates most clearly. Although this surpasses the understanding of some, it does not follow that it is not true. If all things are to be said truly and openly, I confess that a small number of those who understand nature correctly can be found. However, almost everyone who has attended school for several years and has acquired some knowledge of Latin, whether they understand nature or not, wishes to be considered philosophers. They vilify philosophers illuminated by the light of nature with strange cavillings and lies, and everywhere parade their ignorance. Therefore, it is not surprising that the secrets of nature are hidden in obscurity and are considered by the uninitiated as mere fables and nonsense. But who can remedy this inconvenience? The corrupt manners of the world must be left behind. I will prove and demonstrate that it is altogether possible to transmute wood into gold, and I will indicate how this can be done. First and foremost, it must be understood that every wood and every herb contains within itself a certain sulfuric salt, to which metals also trace their origin. They share an intimate affinity and a great similarity, so that they readily undergo transformation from the mineral to the vegetable, and vice versa, as I have indicated in other places in my writings. When one examines them externally, a considerable difference is indeed evident between wood or any herb and metal. However, if one reverts and reduces them to their primary matter, no significant difference remains, as is clear from the continuity of the miracle of the world. Therefore, if the primary matter of vegetables is joined to some metallic wood, they blend without difficulty. Conversely, if a metal has been reduced to primary matter, and some seed of a plant is introduced to it, it is transformed into a plant, as I have often confirmed through experience. If these two were not so closely related to each other, such a mutual transformation would not occur so easily. They distrust one another in terms of seed, but they converge in their primary matter. This is evident, for instance, if non-corrosive sulfuric salt is mixed with sand and moistened with water, and seeds of various herbs are introduced. Each seed draws its own nourishment from there, producing something like itself in terms of various colors, scent, and unique flavor, along with their own virtues and distinctive powers. All of these characteristics emerge from a single salt, while colors, flavors, scents, and such things do not arise from the former. To make this clearer, it must be stated that the principles of vegetables are water, seed, and sulfur, from which metals also originate, not from the common mercury as many believe. For this reason, common mercury is not the source. Silver, for example, has its unique nature as well. It is born from these three principles, from which all other metals and vegetables also derive their origin, namely, from water, salt, and sulfur, which is clearly demonstrated through their anatomy. Once these ideas are shared with the uninitiated crowd, they will deliberate on refuting my opinion, as it may seem unworthy of belief to only a few. The cause of this incredulity is the ignorance and inexperience of those individuals who, without any experimentation, indeed, those who engage in the study of natural things and remain entirely blind to the rays of nature's light are truly blind moles. I reiterate and affirm what I have so often emphasized in numerous words, namely, that a metal can be transformed into a plant, and vice versa. There is no plant found from which natural and yellow sulfur, similar to mineral sulfur, cannot be prepared. This prepared sulfur, if joined to a certain metallic sulfur, will mature into a metal, albeit not without a medium, as I have frequently indicated in my writings, and I have said that this medium is salt. Therefore, whoever knows how to join immature sulfur, whether mineral or vegetable, to mature sulfur of a certain metal, will nourish and increase the fixed and consistent sulfur of gold or silver, just as it also turns a seed of any herb into another species and property, whether white or red, as a kind of ferment does. Thus, gold or silver can be made from sulfuric salt, according to someone's judgment. However, it requires the appropriate time, for such transformation is gradually and step by step accomplished with the suitable heat, just as it is commonly done in the propagation of vegetables and minerals. X. It is evident from these things that this transmutation is a work of nature herself, which numerous experiments I have conducted, and can still conduct, clearly demonstrate. Therefore, there is no reason for anyone to consider such things as incredible or absurd. Whether St. John performed this transmutation with the aid of some natural art or whether it was accomplished through divine power, we do not discuss here, as it suffices for us to demonstrate by natural reasoning that such things can be achieved. For when wood, bread, or the fruit of the earth, or even any herb, is properly combined with its due salt in the manner of an art and reduced to the first matter, that very salt transforms the flour, bread, wood, or herb into sulfur of the same kind, which enhances the growth capacity of plants and minerals. When such salt, reduced to powder, is mixed with white silicates and then melted by a strong fire, it produces a red and transparent stone or glass. If subjected to prolonged heat, it turns green, and finally, like coal, it becomes black, acquiring such hardness that it can be cut and polished like precious stones. Here, the eager practitioner of the art can see that, by one and the same method and in one and the same time, gold can be produced from wood and beautiful, transparent stones of various colors can be obtained from white silicates. However, concerning divine and natural things, as for this first matter we mentioned, which can yield both metals and plants, it should be known that it can be most easily prepared from metals, plants, and even animals with the assistance of fire and a certain non-corrosive salt. Indeed, within the space of 3 hours, a piece of bread, meat, or any metal can be transformed into sulfur with such ease. The same occurs in the stomachs of animals and humans, where plants and animals consumed are digested within a 20-hour interval, and they are transmuted into that sulfuric salt from which they originated. Metals in their fixed and compact form have no rights in the stomach, as they cannot be reduced to the first matter unless they are first dissolved into the first matter, as well as opened up through a radical solution in those stomachs. Thus, just like plants and animals, they are digested and consumed by them. But what is the need for the operation of human stomachs to accomplish such things when such operations can be easily performed with the assistance of fire and art? The humid putrefaction process without the aid of fire will provide the same result in animals and plants over an extended period. However, it is exceedingly difficult in metals and can only be achieved. And are human stomachs capable of reducing any vegetable to the first matter within an extremely long period? They are not even equal to transforming any vegetable into the first matter, as they only exercise their powers on those vegetables that have been adequately prepared in advance to be digestible, assimilable, and convertible into the first matter. Indeed, they must be previously cooked, boiled, or otherwise prepared, and, moreover, a significant part of them does not tolerate such preparation, as they are entirely contrary to human nature and, if ingested into the human body, would exert nothing but poisonous effects. In the same manner, minerals and metals are said to be reduced to the first matter in the human stomach, whereas the stomach itself does not know how to tolerate such substances. Indeed, they are regarded as poison and would not be expelled without great danger to life. Gold is an exception here, as it is the only metal that, when properly prepared, does not resist reduction to the first matter in the human stomach. However, this process is neither necessary nor preferable, as art provides a much easier and quicker method. Those who are unfamiliar with this artful reduction may find natural methods cumbersome, tedious, and time-consuming, which is the last thing they need. For this reason, Nature should also give way to art in this regard. Indeed, some ancient philosophers rightly regarded the excrement of animals highly due to the incredible powers it conceals. However, since we have more suitable and more appropriate medicines readily available, we do not omit them without reason but leave them to those who lack access to better ones. This is a common practice among rural inhabitants far from cities and pharmacies, where the use of various medicinal excrements is considered refined. The excrement of small mice is used to purge the bodies of girls and boys. Horse and goose dung, when mixed with water, beer, or wine, pressed through linen, and consumed, is employed to induce sweating in the treatment of feverish conditions. In erysipelas and other ailments related to the neck, pork dung is used with the application of fire or water. Lamb dung, on the other hand, is used for various types of swellings. White dog dung is employed for treating angina and other throat disorders, as well as for the ailments of humans, which they unknowingly treat with it for various internal and external bodily defects. I remember that at one time, human excrement provided momentary relief from a prolonged illness, which it quickly and effectively alleviated, astonishing those who were unaware of such a rapid cure. Whoever understands the nature and properties of excrement can easily convince themselves that it can achieve wondrous effects. The reason is evident because human excrement is nothing but bread, meat, or other substances reduced to the first matter, freed from all impurities, and prepared for its inherent powers to act. C2. Without great difficulty, natural burning sulfur can be obtained from human excrement, similar to mineral sulfur, which is usually mixed with charcoal and saltpeter to make blasting powder, and also not much different from a certain salt produced by Paracelsus. However, both that sulfur and that salt are contained within human excrement. These two substances, namely sulfur and salt, can perform remarkable operations, and I believe that there is no doubt about their remarkable powers. Place a gold coin in human excrement for a while, then cleanse it by washing, and you will find it turned yellow. If it had been thrown into lye, it would dissolve, just like common mineral sulfur. However, that yellowish substance adhering to silver is nothing more than sulfur of a vegetable or animal origin derived from the food that a person consumes. This, I say, is the reason why the excrement of humans and animals can produce such great effects, which bread and meat are unable to produce unless they have been reduced to the first matter beforehand. However, I do not admit this into the category of medicines, as I only indicate from where they derive their power to resist human diseases. I assert this only to provide an explanation for why vegetables, animals, and minerals exercise their powers most effectively when they have returned to the first matter. It is not absolutely necessary for this to occur in the stomachs of animals, as it happens with the aid of fire. Whichever way this reduction is accomplished, the two first matters, namely, the one produced through the digestion of animal stomachs and the one obtained through the operation of fire, are not so different that they can only be distinguished by a slight difference in their operation. The one produced through fire is purer and does not produce as much stench as the one produced by animal stomachs, although they have similar powers in the process of gilding and both possess a sulfuric nature. Hence, in bread and in the meat of birds' wings, there is a volatile and immature substance hidden. For this reason, I conclude that in all things born from the earth and matured only by the heat of the sun, volatile and spiritual gold is necessarily hidden. However, it is present in one subject in greater abundance than in another, although it is not noticed until the body containing it is returned to the first matter through the operation of art. Since the art, as if unknown to the understanding of peasants, surpasses their comprehension, it is fair to allow them to use their own and other animals' excrement for their benefit, which no one will interpret as a negative action. Indeed, more powerful and greater powers are found in more potent excrement derived from the substances from which they originated. Bread, wine, meat, and similar substances destined for bodily nourishment are not medicinal, but only nutrients. From these nutrients, after the animal's body has ceased to exist, C3. Separated, what remains gains medicinal powers and virtues. If I were not afraid that this discussion on excrements might stray too far from my original purpose, I would recount astonishing facts about excrements. For even metals, prepared once again through the marvelous operations of animals, can be wonderfully transformed and reduced to the first matter, although it is by no means necessary to undertake such a method to achieve it when a more convenient and better way is readily available without the operations of animals. Those ignorant of this art of conversion should be content with the fact that others, more skilled through experience, have led the way to better methods. Paracelsus once narrated to some unlearned physicians the incredible medicinal virtues hidden in the excrements of animals, which stirred up great anger among them, and they thought that they had been greatly insulted by Paracelsus because he had provided human excrement as a great medicinal secret when they requested it. Undoubtedly, he wanted to indicate to them, in such a material, the great secrets that were hidden, which surpassed their limited understanding. However, Paracelsus had an incomparable intellect, and he would have undoubtedly revealed those discovered secrets to them beyond any doubt if they had not reacted with such inflamed anger. In his writings elsewhere, he explicitly stated that he who does not know his own particular excrement knows absolutely nothing, and is blind, to whom nothing in heaven and earth consists, which words clearly indicate that Paracelsus could have achieved many things with excrement. However, I assert this, that my transmutation and conversion of substances into the first matter, which excrements work on, far surpasses it. This is because it is endowed with greater efficacy, not from excrement but in the form of sulfuric salt, and it is revealed in the sight of all and can be conveniently used for any ailments. Its virtues are not restricted to any specific illness but, in general, it works most effectively not only in all human diseases but also in other ailments and deficiencies of vegetables and minerals, as I have shown in other places in my writings. I have brought these excrements into the discussion, not with the intention of using them as medicine, but to show the remarkable difference between the herb that arises from the earth, which the digestive process of the animal's stomach freed and reduced to the operation of latent powers. This I have clearly proven with animal excrements. Experienced and knowledgeable physicians have omitted excremental medicines and, through spagyric operation, have reduced their herbs to the first matter, that is, salt of sulfur, so that they may excel in greater and more significant virtues than the useless ones, which are devoid of all power. C4. Just as God formed the first man Adam from the earth and breathed into him the breath of life, granting him the Garden of Eden, but the devil, using the serpent as an intermediary, led him away from God and precipitated him into eternal damnation, so too, man, who, deceived by Satan, turned away from his Creator, had to be reconciled to God through the divine serpent and mediator, namely Jesus Christ. This could not have been achieved through any other means, and God allowed it to happen. Otherwise, God could have restrained the devil and prevented him from deceiving man or even preserved Satan himself in his angelic state, so that he would not be inflamed with hatred towards God or humanity. With this celestial mystery, the elemental philosophical secret can be compared in a similar manner. For if the elemental soul fell from God during the separation when it elevated itself from the formless chaos to a higher state, leaving behind its impure, terrestrial, and corruptible sulfur, it could not return to God without this operation. And if it had not been expelled and cast into the abyss of the earth, then when the rays of the sun strike the earth, they would not be hindered from bestowing pure perfection and constancy on the solar children. So that not only gold but also other metals like iron, lead, tin, copper, etc., would not have been impurely born, bearing the impurity received from that impure, foul, and earthly sulfur that mixes with the metallic body in the bowels of the earth. Therefore, such sulfur must be provided to the unborn metals as assistance so that they may become similar to gold, as the true offspring of the sun. This is necessary for the purpose of humbling gold, allowing it to assume the saline nature, thus becoming the medium for radically converting imperfect metals to perfection. Common salt is the medium for reconciling gold with universal sulfur and for producing the transmutation of imperfect metals into the perfect, about which all philosophers who understand it have written clear and lucid treatises. I have recently written about the same matter and described the saline water or the potable gold, which certainly conceals a great mystery, even though many do not understand or believe it. Because it tinges the entire mercury, it cannot be considered a simple solution of gold, as no water or liquid, even from gold itself, can achieve. C5. And it is possible for dissolved gold or living silver, or both adhering to each other, to form a white amalgam. However, such an amalgam will become yellow and hard, or the living silver itself will never be transmuted into gold, even if it is boiled in a golden solution for 100 years. For the snowy whiteness of mercury never allows itself to be covered and tinged by common gold, but it obeys any sulfur that tinges and coagulates it, about which more is discussed in the appendix to the continuation of the Miraculum Mundi. Examine these words carefully, in which the greatest mysteries will be found, but it will only reveal itself to a person on whom Venus has opened the eyes, with which one may behold the light of nature. Yet, it is not so effective that it will reveal such mysteries to a person to whom Venus has not opened the eyes, with which one may behold the light of nature. For without God, there is no light, and without light, there is no life, no understanding, and no wisdom. Darkness is death, and eternal death is perdition. Salt speaks of itself in wrath. I am the fire of life. There is no combustible sulfur except through me. Gold will not burn unless I, the mediator, approach. Salt is the only medium between combustible and corrupt sulfur or imperfect metals and gold. Salt first overcomes the destructive sulfur or Satan, who lies hidden in emaciated death, to be conquered and vanquished in hell. But so that the eager student, burning with desire for divine and human mysteries, may not die any longer, I briefly, clearly, and truly describe the entire operation in the manner of the philosophers, as I have often carried it out with my own hands but have never brought it to the due perfection due to various obstacles. Take common earth salt, thoroughly purified, and add to it the proper weight of terrestrial sulfur. If you have previously received the rays of the sun in the salt, let salt and sulfur fight in the inferno until salt conquers death and the devil, and, with the glorified body by which sick brothers are to be healed or converted into gold, rises again. This is the entire operation so widely celebrated, in which nothing is omitted except the weight, Satan, or the name of death. The name of salt has already been revealed by me, and nothing else remains here but to express the names of death and Satan, which I will conceal from everyone for the glory of God and the benefit of one's neighbor. Death and the devil of all metals are that combustible sulfur which, having its seat in all things, is equally inherent in vegetables and animals as well as in minerals. Burn salt and sulfur together and make them fight until life, i.e., salt, conquers death, i.e., sulfur burning, and swallows up both, so that the glorified body may arise, a beautiful ruby or a transparent and red carbuncle-like stone, by which the diseases of both humans and metals can be cured. In this manner of operation, of the utmost importance and conveyed in a few words, there lies hidden a mystery that only 1 in 1,000 will grasp. Hence, because of its cheap materials, it will be a stumbling block and subject to contempt by many. But since we will make our entrance with simplicity and folly, let us make fools of those who seek the good where it is not found and, having it before their eyes, neither know nor want to know it. If I had presented some comical operation in the manner of the philosophers, with lengthy verbal circumlocution, I have no doubt that the blind world would have received it with a more eager spirit than such a brief and concise method of operation. Therefore, Sendivogius and other true philosophers have rightly said that if the true method of operation were revealed word for word to anyone, he would still not consider it of any value, due to its verbal cheapness. Why, then, one might object, is such a valuable thing as salt being subjected to such vileness and contempt? Does sulfur ever become gold? Hence, they neither want nor can believe the truth. To clearly prove that the mysteries are hidden in salt and sulfur of great importance, it is necessary to manifest those materials to many. The symbol of eternity is salt, as it is not diminished or altered by fire, air, water, or earth, but endures for a long time without corruption. It is a well-known fact and is present before the blind world. It is an aid to all other things and in need of no other thing's aid. Burning sulfur is the symbol of death, and the true devil of hell, whom no element or any other thing, except salt alone, can conquer and overcome. For even if sulfur were held in its own prison for many years and were obliged to endure the torment of fire, it would still not feel the slightest change and would lose none of its weight, provided that an exit was not allowed through an open door. In the same way, even if it were exposed to air or water for 100 years, it would still not putrefy. Only salt conquers it and transforms it into a carbuncle, indeed, so named because it shines with a transparent red brilliance like glowing coal, and it excels in all its virtues among all precious stones, but it is found among very few. Those who possess it keep it hidden, and they do not expose it for sale like diamonds or other precious stones. It is not easily found in rugged mountains, but it is sought through prayers to God and acquired through the labor of hands. But why should I say more? I know that I have already exceeded the limit, although even those things by which I have exceeded the limits of speech are capable of transcending the understanding and the capacity of the impious. But so that no one should doubt it, I will prove that salt and sulfur, though held in low esteem, are nevertheless the noblest of creatures. I will demonstrate that salt is the beginning and end of all things. In the creation of the world, salt was the first thing that came into being, from which later the four elements emerged, so that philosophers call salt the concentrated center of the elements, and it always remains the same as it was in the beginning. All things arise from salt, and they return to it after being destroyed by death. And salt has three great treasures: earth, fire, and spirit. Salt is fire, and fire is salt, and the third is the hidden spirit contained in them. When the Almighty Creator pronounced the word fiat and created salt, he then divided chaos into four parts, assigning different places and names to each and giving a beginning to the elements, which initiated mutual actions and ordered their generations. The purest and most subtle part sought the firmament and gave birth to the sun, moon, and stars. The densest and heaviest part joined with the earthly mass and occupied an enormous place. The portions of water and air concealed themselves in the middle, embracing the earth's globe within their circuit. When the superior or fiery part acts upon the inferior or watery part with the stars and exerts its forces, the water, as if pregnant and fruitful, becomes involved. It returns and generates salt within the interval. However, if this continuous generation of salt were absent, produced by the action of fire in the sea or flowing water, and the other elements were at rest, God has assigned their own tasks to each of them: to the air, to receive the seeds of things from the stars and to communicate them to the water, to distribute the received seeds through the channels and fissures of the earth, so that in this way, both within the earth itself and on its surface, all kinds of minerals and metals are produced, as well as an abundance of herbs, shrubs, trees, and various grains for the nourishment, growth, and multiplication of animals. Everyday experience bears witness to the truth of this, for if the sea did not distribute its salt through the earth, numerous valuable minerals would not exist within its bowels, nor would so many and varied trees, herbs, and grains grow on its surface. Although the surface of the earth takes away salt from vegetables and minerals from its inner depths, the sea alone restores them to itself, so that the earth is never lacking in this salt, of which it is a partner in rendering. For if the sea did not provide the earth with inexhaustible nourishment, the earth itself, deprived of the same, would not be able to supply proper nourishment and growth to other things. Just as a chest into which nothing is stored and which is exhausted by endless withdrawals, eventually becomes empty and retains nothing. Because, by the wise providence of God, it was ordained that the earth, without interruption, should be fertile in good fruits and sustain the human race, necessity itself demanded that the earth be continually supplied with nourishment from the sea. For this purpose, the celestial bodies never cease to animate the air and water with their influences, so that the elements, by mutual assistance, may aid each other and that no obstacle be presented to nature's course. For if only one element were to rest and cease from performing its function, it would be necessary for the others to also cease and rest in a similar manner. If the stars did not produce the salt and the water did not disperse it through the earth, how could it be possible for anything to be born and grow? The whole earth itself would eventually become dry and perish if it were not for the continuous influx of salt, which never ceases but rather increases and saturates. There is no stone that lacks salt, and this proves that salt is its nourishment and its source. It shows that the mountains, from which a great supply of salt nourishment is copiously provided from the nearby sea, seem to grow and decrease as if they were living. Nowhere is this more evident than in places where the raised mountains are extremely fertile and rich in minerals. In such places, they are conveniently excavated and provide access and exit with their depth and height. However, in such places, because, by the wise providence of God, it was ordained that the earth, without interruption, should be fertile in good fruits and sustain the human race, necessity itself demanded that the earth be continually supplied with nourishment from the sea. For this purpose, the celestial bodies never cease to animate the air and water with their influences, so that the elements, by mutual assistance, may aid each other and that no obstacle be presented to nature's course. For if only one element were to rest and cease from performing its function, it would be necessary for the others to also cease and rest in a similar manner. If the stars did not produce the salt and the water did not disperse it through the earth, how could it be possible for anything to be born and grow? The whole earth itself would eventually become dry and perish if it were not for the continuous influx of salt, which never ceases but rather increases and saturates. There is no stone that lacks salt, and this proves that salt is its nourishment and its source. It shows that the mountains, from which a great supply of salt nourishment is copiously provided from the nearby sea, seem to grow and decrease as if they were living. Nowhere is this more evident than in places where the raised mountains are extremely fertile and rich in minerals. In such places, they are conveniently excavated and provide access and exit with their depth and height. However, in such places, d. To prove that all things originate from salt and return to it, I adduce the unanimous agreement of all philosophers, who affirm that all things are reduced to first matter and return to salt. From this statement, it follows that they began from salt, and this argument cannot be refuted by anyone. Now, let someone ask how one can be certain of this fact or by what means all things can be reduced to first matter. To attain knowledge of these labors and operations, one must consult experienced philosophers and chemists, for it is not within the scope of inexperience to expound on such operations. A rustic observer notices the labor of nature, for he daily sees that every herb, every tree, every human, and every animal, after death, undergoes putrefaction and turns into a sulfuric salt, concealed but unknown to him, even though it enriches the land, making it fertile by manuring it with the same emaciated and sickly substance. As long as the herb, tree, or animal enjoys its vital breath, it does not release its superfluous feces, which preserve it. However, as soon as death arrives and breaks the bond, the other parts can no longer subsist for long, and they cannot remain where they derive their origin. When they depart, the rain dissolves the salt and returns it to the ocean, from where it had originally come. The spirit is attracted from the stars. The material of the earth remains on the earth, from which it originated. Terrestrial fruits do not inherit this universal nourishment from the sea by hereditary right. They only receive it as a favor, and they enjoy it as long as they live. After death, the universal mother, namely the sea, reclaims it and bestows it upon others to whom she had granted it. If you have the desire to test this matter in another way, burn a herb, wood, stone, or any animal with fire. In this way, everything spiritual will be expelled as vapor, and salt will remain in the ashes, which must be extracted from the water and separated from the dead earth. Therefore, salt is the beginning and end of all things, and its accurate understanding is worthy, as it contains the greatest mysteries and secrets. One who is ignorant of this does not deserve to be called a philosopher, but should be given the name of a vain person who, in his native land, is no different from an ignorant and stubborn donkey, knowing and holding nothing other than accusations and calumnies. To conceal his ignorance, he cavils at the truth and holds it in contempt. The ancients were not unaware that the most excellent virtues are concealed in salt. Many philosophers believe that something divine is hidden in salt and, for this reason, expressly wrote that the knowledge of God can be drawn from nothing more clearly than from fire and salt. Therefore, they associated fire and salt with the symbols of God and immortality by adding them to their sacrifices and altars at all times. D2. They feared to touch any fire, especially such a sacred one, with unwashed hands, lest they provoke divine wrath or contaminate these most noble creations with impure hands. They swore by salt and bread, using no greater oath, and when examining anything with the utmost accuracy, they would propose salt and bread to test the truth, from where the common saying, to swear by salt and bread, originated. They held salt to be inviolable, and bread, our Savior Christ, is called wisdom. In the sacred baptism, the priest placing salt on the infant's mouth would add these words to signify the association of wisdom with those who pass through baptism, as a reminder that Christ, as the light of the world, should be invoked in their regard. In many places, this custom has been abolished by novices, so it is to be feared that if the world continues in this manner, even the name of Christ may eventually be prohibited. Such audacity has advanced in the world that punishment has been imposed to prohibit the celebration of the festivals of the Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ's birth. What a pitiful condition of today's Christians. Christ himself called his disciples the salt of the earth. Luke 19:9. Salt and water unite God and man through faith and baptism. In the same way, fixed gold and burning sulfur, with the help of salt and water, are joined, which were considered impossible by others but are nevertheless achieved by chemists. They feared to touch any fire, especially such a sacred one, with unwashed hands, lest they provoke divine wrath or contaminate these most noble creations with impure hands. They swore by salt and bread, using no greater oath, and when examining anything with the utmost accuracy, they would propose salt and bread to test the truth, from where the common saying, to swear by salt and bread, originated. They held salt to be inviolable, and bread, our Savior Christ, is called wisdom. In the sacred baptism, the priest placing salt on the infant's mouth would add these words to signify the association of wisdom with those who pass through baptism, as a reminder that Christ, as the light of the world, should be invoked in their regard. In many places, this custom has been abolished by novices, so it is to be feared that if the world continues in this manner, even the name of Christ may eventually be prohibited. Such audacity has advanced in the world that punishment has been imposed to prohibit the celebration of the festivals of the Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ's birth. What a pitiful condition of today's Christians. Christ himself called his disciples the salt of the earth. Luke 19:9. Salt and water unite God and man through faith and baptism. In the same way, fixed gold and burning sulfur, with the help of salt and water, are joined, which were considered impossible by others but are nevertheless achieved by chemists. It is well known that when they wish to separate gold and silver, they usually add a little sulfur, which, like a wall, separates gold and silver due to the enmity that exists between them, as gold has a strong antipathy to sulfur, so much so that it can never tolerate it. However, this enmity is resolved by salt and water, which reconcile both, just as Christ, the wisdom of salt, and the divine light, reconciles the sinful sinner as a mediator with God. Christ says in some places that salt is good. When the earth lacks salt, it produces no fruits. The same is true for clay lacking salt. Here, I have the witness of truth itself, eternity, accusing my impious enemies, the Farnerians, who attempt to refute the miracle of the world I have presented with their cavil and slander. In this case, it has been most clearly demonstrated by me, not only that the land itself is made fertile and fruitful by hidden salt, but also that the earth would be turned into a rich and fertile land. By the testimony of this true witness, the slanderers and defamers of their most putrid falsehoods will undoubtedly have their venomous tongues bridled, and they will no longer attempt to gnaw at me with their poisonous teeth in the future. Truth may be suppressed, but it is never oppressed, as God ultimately brings it to light, even though sometimes it is pressed and tormented by Satan, the father of lies and his archenemy. In another place, Christ says, "No one is good but one, that is, God." In another place, he also says, "Salt is good." This testimony is most effective and offers the highest praise for salt. Although salt is associated with understanding and wisdom, it is for this reason that an ignorant, dull, and foolish person is called unsalted, and in the same sense, an unsalted speech is considered to be without any wisdom, like someone who is almost no salt, unpolished and tasteless. Hence, common proverbs describe such a person as insipid and tasteless, saying that he is more insipid and tasteless than unsalted and tasteless discourse. There is also a common saying that where there is no flavor, there is no nourishment. There is nothing in the realm of nature that can be born without a moderate amount of salt, just as a human being cannot be born without the sun and salt. A certain philosopher added, "Fiery is the strength of salt, of celestial origin. The sun and salt are the parents of all things. They conceive everything, and without them, nothing is conceived. Flesh and bread seasoned with salt provide more strength than all other foods that are not seasoned with salt. In fermentation, wine becomes stronger and more pleasant when salt is added." Note, however, the salt mentioned here should not be common and ordinary salt that does not enhance the taste of wine. Empty barrels can indeed be cleansed by dissolving common salt in hot water, removing all bad taste and odor, and preserving them with their inherent strength. Furthermore, salt purifies wine. Wine, when combined with genuine salt, enhances its qualities and, therefore, should be preferred in many ways. For true salt, when properly combined with genuine wine, can dissolve the earthly sun, i.e., gold, and extract royal medicine from it, as indicated in other parts of my writings. With easy inference, anyone gifted with understanding can foresee that if the noble virtues of these three heart-strengthening substances, namely the power of gold and the virtues of salt, are combined, it will produce the most noble medicine. Paracelsus established that without true salt, no true potable gold could be prepared. If there were absolutely no salt in the earth, neither herbs nor grasses could grow, and the fodder for animals would not exist, making it impossible for humans to sustain life. Furthermore, all animals seek the fertility of salt, as you will find in the description of my green liquor. The combination of gold and true salt can restore the lifeless nature of seeds to its original fertility. It can also give a green and fertile appearance to dead and barren trees if this medicine is applied to their roots. On the contrary, common salt is harmful to vegetables before preparation and causes their death through its corrosive nature. However, after preparation, it is beneficial for making them fertile. Nevertheless, some vegetables can tolerate the corrosive power of salt, particularly those that are sown. D4. Some vegetables are capable of tolerating the corrosive nature of salt, especially those born from the sea, such as kali, from which the ancients prepared their alkali salt. When burnt, this plant leaves behind a highly acrid salt. All fruits that have a bitter or acrid taste and bitter or acrid kernels, such as olives, lemons, golden apples, lentils, and palms, are suitable for enduring the corrosiveness of salt. On the other hand, common salt delights in the palma and other fruits. In contrast, grapes, grains, and fruit-bearing trees prefer a sweeter soil. More on this will follow. Some of the ancients, valuing salt highly, dug up such an abundance of salt in the island of Sardinia near the city of Cateria that they granted it freely to the locals for their necessary use without any cost, while the surplus was to be sold to foreign sailors and merchants for export. The rustic inhabitants, overflowing with such an abundance of salt, generously provided the same to their cattle and livestock, allowing them to produce the most excellent cheeses widely known throughout all of Europe. Whether these are the same as the Parmesan cheeses among us, I am not certain. The farmers and cheese makers have such a plentiful supply of milk and cheese that they owe it primarily to the salt. This account is entirely in harmony with the truth. The same author, whose name is Bernhard Cornelius, also mentions a city in the West Indies situated on a sandy and utterly barren soil, abundant with a multitude of fish captured there. The inhabitants spread large quantities of salt over the heads of the fish in a deep pit. After a certain time, they remove the heads of the fish and bury a grain of wheat in the sand of that barren soil, and the grains, when they sprout again, yield 100-fold harvest. This is not contrary to the truth, since the heads of the fish preserve the salt on the land for a long time, preventing it from being washed away by rain, thus ensuring that the juice and nourishment of the wheat are not lost. However, such methods of bearing wheat are far-fetched and impractical. To me, the preparation of salt is quite different. Without excessive expenses and labor, it provides a great quantity of suitable salt to make barren lands fertile without being washed away by rain. Sulfurous salt must be rendered in such a way that it can universally nourish. Note: someone may ask, if sulfurous salt is conducive to fertility, why does the highly sulfurous Dead Sea not support fish or contribute to fertility? I respond that the said sea is saturated with mineral sulfur and bitterness, harmful to all, including fish and plants, due to its poison. Even fish in waters with excessive salt cannot survive, which should be noted, for excess turns everything into a vice. As for what promotes fertility in natural things, fish demonstrate it by eating many thousands of fish at once in the waters, which is not granted to animals and birds. God did not intend Pharaoh to dream of 7 extra cattle too. D5. Then, after another 7 years, 7 emaciated cows came up from the sea to the land, symbolizing that fertility comes from the sea's origin. Joseph, equally illuminated by God's natural light and divine wisdom, interpreted this as follows. He had the salt. It is marked with the title Salt of Philosopher's Fountain. Hesiod, Homer, Plato, Pythagoras, and other philosophers assert that salt is most closely related to God among all things. I maintain that through the agency of salt, many of God's chosen children become sons. If salt were absent from the earth, nourishing fruits, essential sustenance for humans, would not emerge, leading to the extinction of humanity, unable to sustain life from the air and seeking multiplication from the earth. Salt pervades milk, honey, sugar, wine, bread, meat, and everything we require. Salt is everything in all things, the beginning and end of all created by God. One might ask, do candles originate from salt? Is it necessary for salt to transform into the seeds of plants, animals into animals, and metals into metals? Can such transitions occur, allowing art to progress more rapidly and correct the slower progress of nature? I respond, indeed, it is possible, and art will achieve it. It has been mentioned that a more concise method to bring salt to the highest perfection exists, which nature cannot achieve. However, the way this is done will not be indicated here. Please be aware that by uniting salt with fire or the sun, marvelous generations arise which do not otherwise appear in sight. For the sake of experimentation, in the months of July, June, and August, expose a wooden vessel filled with common water to solar rays, so that it is subjected to astral influences day and night until it dries out. Once dried, refill it with another portion of water and always keep the vessel full. Eventually, from the salt contained in the water, all kinds of worms will be born without any prior source, such as tadpoles, toads, and snakes, unlike in other putrid waters where they are accustomed to originate. N.B. The vessel should be made of wood, not metal, to avoid the inclusion of vitriol salts that are harmful to living creatures. Be cautious not to introduce any iron or copper into the vessel, as it may corrupt the operation. Alternatively, fill the same vessel with sand and moisten it with water under the solar rays, repeating the humidifications until you see various and unknown herbs emerging, born without any seed, as is evident from other writings of mine. Gold is the most constant of all metallic bodies and, as it were, invincible, none other. Gold shudders at the violent assaults of elements and in the very fire exhibits such remarkable constancy that it does not yield even in the slightest to its own weight, although it is detained in perpetual torment by the fire for many years. Nevertheless, it extracts the soul of salt itself, taking away its beautiful red color and the effervescence by which it is accustomed to resist fire, acquiring the color of lead, fragility, and fugacity of antimony. It surpasses the faith and credulity of the unskilled, even though experience itself refutes it. Hence, it appears that there are more powers in salt than in all the elements and elemental things, and therefore we consider it justly and deservedly named the concentrated center of the elements. Gold eludes the most potent and subtle powers of fire, against which there is nothing that can resist, yet it is overcome by salt, which, through a marvelous miracle of art, attracts its noblest part, the soul, from the denser and earthier parts. How noble a thing it is, every one may conjecture, and without a doubt it is seen to occupy the highest place in medicine. Consider what Sendivogius writes about his soul wandering through his steel. Indeed, I confess that, although at different times such extraction has succeeded according to my wish, so that the extracted soul has left behind a fragile, fleeting, and black body of gold, the same operation does not always respond to my will as desired, as if God does not always permit it. I would not want anyone to think, as commonly believed, that such a secret is harmless. I am content with things of lesser value, for I have brought all these things to light for the sole purpose of demonstrating the extraordinary powers of salt and teaching others. However, no one here should persuade themselves that with the assistance of that culinary salt, this royal medicine can be extracted from gold. Indeed, for this purpose, another salt prepared by art and fire is required. But a more extensive discussion of this artful concentration of gold, the fourth part of German prosperity, will soon, God willing, be seen in a fuller light. There are indeed more things to be said about salt, and more could be said, but we shall reserve them for another place and time, as what has been said thus far seems sufficient to me for the present. I conclude and affirm, therefore, that salt is a help to all things, and conversely, it requires no assistance. Ponder these matters carefully, and you will find many benefits. Someone might ask me here and say, what salt are you talking about? For there are many kinds of salt. I speak of the universal and well-known salt, which is boiled from seawater or spring waters, or dug from its own pits in mountains and lands, and is used for common household purposes. This well-known salt, this universal treasure, and general wealth, I call, and not without reason, for it provides sustenance to the entire world, supplying not only the animals of the land, the fish in the waters, and the birds in the air, but also all things. Metals in the bowels of the earth, for the use of humanity, not to mention the ultimate and universal medicine for curing any human diseases, which its beneficial properties can achieve. Therefore, it is rightly and deservedly called the universal treasure of the world when nothing at all is found that owes its origin to salt. But that one salt is purer, better, and more precious than another, I do not deny. I only say that the origin and principle of all salts are one and the same, and the difference between them arises from their individual circumstances. For as long as salt is pure and mixed with nothing else, as when it is extracted from seawater by the sun, it remains one and the same, possessing the same taste and properties. But when it is first mixed with other substances or transformed by fire, it necessarily undergoes a change, becoming either better or worse than its original nature. Wood and stones, for example, when subjected to the action of fire, are transformed into charcoal or ashes, from which a portion of salt evaporates with the smoke, while the rest remains in the ashes, exhibiting a completely different nature from what it had before the violent action of fire. Indeed, by the operation of fire, salts acquire an igneous and sulfurous nature and necessarily assume different properties, which is well known and requires no further investigation. This well-known, simple, and unmixed salt is the one obtained from seawater, springs, mountains, and land pits. It is called various names, saltpeter, alum, and similar things, but they are inferior in their terrestrial and mineral properties, and unworthy of the name of simple salts. Saltpeter, although it belongs to these salts, cannot be called a simple salt in the sense we operate with. It is either extracted from the earth or obtained by pouring water on human and animal urine and then crystallized by boiling, thus separating from other salts. It can also be derived from walls and plastered walls or extracted from mountains and limestone rocks by the action of water, or it can be prepared by art from common salt, wood, or limestone. However, no matter where it comes from, salts of the same nature, when ignited by fire, assume different properties and are called alkaline. Another salt is prepared from the ashes of burnt wood, having a different nature and different properties, and they are called alkaline. Another salt is prepared from urine, common salt, and the blood of bulls, known by the name ammoniacal salt and used in various applications. There used to be another salt called armoniaci extracted from certain mountains and once transported to us, but it is no longer available. These salts are more active and serve various purposes, such as marine salt, spring salt, mountain salt, and the one called Gemini salis, which is used in the kitchen to preserve food like meat and fish from corruption for some time. The primary use of vitriol is in dye houses for dyeing silk, woolen, and linen fabrics in black color, as well as in pharmacies where it serves in the preparation of medicines. See the first part of my furnaces. Alum is useful for dyers, doctors, and other artisans. The diabolic powder is made from saltpeter and is otherwise highly useful in the preparation of many excellent medicines, the improvement of chemical metals, the invention and utility of many mechanical arts, as can be seen from my 2 chemical furnaces. 2. Spagyric pharmacopoeias, the miracle of the world, its defense, and continuation, as well as from the 4 parts of prosperity in Germany. Fixed salts, supplied by the ashes of burnt wood, are used in medicine and alchemy, but more commonly in dyeing fabrics and preparing smegma. Sal ammoniac is used in medicine, alchemy, and other arts. However, these salts are so well known that we can rightly forego a lengthy description of them. Therefore, those we have mentioned are the salts that have, over a long period of time and through enduring experience, revealed their virtues and powers. Among these, kitchen salt excels in nobility, excellence, and necessity, as it is the source from which all other salts originate, and it is also produced by the art itself. They are indeed valuable, as my writings often teach, but among all other salts, whether known or unknown, the common kitchen salt, which is the truest and will remain the truest, stands out. For with great ease, it is possible through the addition of some metallic sulfur and the assistance of fire to transform alum or vitriol into ardent salt. By the peculiar action of a certain stronger fire, it is transformed into alkaline salt, and by the power of fire and sulfur, it is depolarized into salt suitable for fertilizing and enriching barren and lean soils, as well as sandy and meager lands. Furthermore, the common culinary salt, with its own spirit, allows itself to be cleansed and purified, acquiring virtues and powers far superior to those of common, impure salt for seasoning food, meats, and fish, through the process of purification and cleansing, obtaining a pleasant taste, whiter and clearer color, a more pleasant flavor, and virtues and powers suitable for seasoning food, meats, and fish that are far more appropriate. It is, in fact, sweet, clear, crystal-like, and so transparent that it crystallizes into perfectly square shapes, which cannot be formed more perfectly even with circles or other instruments. Therefore, no one will deny that salt purified in this way will be more conducive to health than that coarse and impure salt. I am amazed at our negligence when it comes to our health. Every day we see with our own eyes that no one can do without salt and that the use of it is essential for the well-being of the body. If not for others, at least for the nobles, who govern many subjects, it would be appropriate to seek ways to prepare and serve such salt on their tables, as it is necessary for both humans and livestock. When it has been thoroughly purified and prepared with skill, it will provide much more goodness and undoubtedly be more beneficial, flavorful, and healthier. Even though the expenses required for this purpose are minimal, they will make the salt so pleasant that its sweetness will invite everyone to desire it. Unlike common salt, it does not induce thirst, as it is free from those terrestrial impurities that still adhere in common salt. On the contrary, it quenches thirst, satisfies hunger, strengthens the heart, the stomach, the brain, and all the members of the body, without allowing any putrefaction in the body, protecting against diseases, and excelling with its marvelous virtues. It is in no way comparable to that coarse salt. It is indeed a great treasure and a grand gift from God, by which the human race is sustained, nourished, strengthened, and increased, and for which the greatest thanks must be given to God. In addition to the mentioned purification, inversion, and conversion of common salt into alum, vitriol, saltpeter, alkalis, and similar substances, another aspect of the same salt, which I have mentioned in my writings, is its purification and further refinement, elevating it from its common state to a much nobler and far superior one. I recall reading about it from no one except Paracelsus, who briefly mentions it in the section on the virtues of common salt, saying, "The virtues of salt consist in its preparation. This raw salt alone preserves the goodness of meats and fish. If it has been well prepared, it keeps everything in its state for an incredible period of time, turning wood into stone, as well as clay or earth. The leaves of trees remain green in it. Whatever is sprinkled with this salt resists all sorts of changes. It conserves like balsam and accomplishes even more, for with the passage of time, it coagulates everything." These incomparable words of the physician and philosopher refer to this remarkable salt. What onyxa means, I am not certain, as I call it the marvelous salt. To itself, it attributes the power to keep everything in its state for an incredible period of time, and it does not deviate from the truth. For one who has prepared such salt will not only achieve the same but much more. I am familiar with the method of preparing it, having frequently prepared it myself, and I have discovered incredible things in it. Whether my preparation corresponds to Paracelsus's or not, everything that Paracelsus says about it is. He attributes far more to his onyxum salt than I do to my mirabilis salt. Neither mine nor anyone else's preparation matters as long as my salt delivers what I claim it can. Therefore, I did not want to give my salt the same name as Paracelsus's, fearing that slanderers and detractors would seize the opportunity to slander me out of hatred and envy. I refrained from using the name Paracelsian onyxum for my salt, which I have already put to use, and instead named it alkahest in my universal menstruum. Arrogant, stubborn sophists and the most ignorant scoffers seized on this and engaged in loud vociferations, claiming that Glauber's alkahest is by no means Paracelsus's, and Helmont's liquor alkahest is inferior to mine. My Helmontian and Paracelsian liquor surpasses theirs by many degrees. Mine is readily available and can be seen, through which I prepare my aurum potabile, transforming mercury into true gold. Paracelsus's and Helmont's acclaimed liquor is entirely invisible and cannot be compared to a ring. A small bird held in one's hand and well kept is better than many thousands of large birds flying in the air, which cannot be seen or captured. This is the reason why I did not want to give my salt the same name, nor did I want to provide a new target for ridicule, and lest I should want to provide material for the ridiculers of my odors, who are more ignorant brethren, although I know full well that my mirabilis salt not only does not yield in any respect to Paracelsus's onyxum salt but also excels it by far greater virtues, which I intend to make clear in the following account. As Paracelsus teaches, his onyxum salt defends itself from corruption over an incredible period of time and ultimately undergoes a remarkable transformation into stone. My remarkable salt not only surpasses that but accomplishes tenfold more. However, before I embark on describing the hidden virtues in my mirabilis salt, I deemed it worthwhile to mention that salts of this kind, prepared by nature, are abundant in the earth and are frequently encountered. They are dissolved by water and rise to the surface. Such springs have been pointed out by Georgius Agricola, who also indicates where these springs can be found and testifies that everything untreated by them is transformed into stone in a short time. Other writers also attest to this, especially Celius in his book on metallic substances. There is no reason for anyone to doubt this, as such springs are found in our own Germany, even though they may be considered of little consequence by some. There is said to be a place in Switzerland where any piece of wood inserted into it, after a certain period, is entirely transformed into stone. The inhabitants of that place have often witnessed this. E3. They experiment with the matter, cutting a piece of wood into the shape of a hone, and then placing it in the water of the aforementioned spring. In this water, the wooden hones are transformed into stone, which is later used for sharpening knives and other instruments. I have seen such hones in my own hands, and their appearance clearly indicates that they were originally made of wood and have undergone an astonishing transformation into stone. There is no doubt about this matter, and there are many sources of such nature and properties in various places. I did not witness the one in Switzerland, but in Basel, at the house of Dr. Exius, who is still alive. To an infant sitting in a very small glass vessel, Senior Exius had poured a peculiar liquid, which had preserved the infant completely incorrupt and intact until the time when it was shown to me. They told me that the infant had been transformed into stone by the liquid, but I, who did not handle it, cannot affirm this as certain. Nevertheless, I saw the infant with a full body as I've just born, and it has been more than 20 years since that time. It is said to have resided in that water for 10 or 15 years and is still believed to reside there, as I was recently informed. However, no one knows whether Senior Exius poured the water over the infant, whether he obtained it from a spring that turns wood into stone, or whether he produced it by some art. I have encountered a similar spring of nature and properties in Austria, near Vienna, a heavily fortified city located about 6 miles from Styria. I, in my youth, embarked on journeys and fell victim to a severe fever known as the Hungarian disease, which rarely spares inexperienced travelers. After regaining some of my former health, I ventured to Vienna, where I experienced a relapse of the illness. The disease had so devastated my appetite that I could neither desire nor digest food. The locals advised me to visit a spring located approximately an hour's journey from the city, in the vicinity of a vineyard. The purpose was to drink its water in order to recover my lost appetite for food. Following their counsel, I brought with me a sizable piece of bread to the spring, although I had little faith in their words, as they had told me that I would consume the entire piece of bread. Upon reaching the spring, I soaked the core of the bread in its water and found it remarkably pleasant to taste, a great surprise considering I had previously rejected even the finest dishes at home. After hollowing out the crust of the bread, I also drank the same water. Having consumed it, I felt that my stomach was so prepared for eating that I eventually even devoured the cup made of bread. I returned home in better and stronger health, recounting the successful outcome to the locals who assured me that if I continued to drink the water, it would completely strengthen my stomach. When asked about the nature of the water, E4, those present replied that the water from the spring resembled salt stones, and being inexperienced in these matters, I initially believed them. However, I later experienced the opposite. The spring's water could not be saltpeter, as it was not suitable for the stomach but rather caused nausea and aversion. It might have been possible that the spring's water, evaporated up to the surface, crystallized into salt-like crystals. But true saltpeter did not lack any fervor or ability to ignite, as one could easily ascertain if they placed the salt on hot embers and examined it for saltpeter's properties. Now, I am certain that the spring continued the same salt to which Paracelsus and I gave the name of miraculous salt. It also possesses the nature whereby it crystallizes into long crystals and yet does not catch fire. The spring is surrounded by wood, among which or in which several water mice have their habitat, swiftly grabbing and swallowing breadcrumbs thrown into the water. I inquired why they did not enclose and fortify the spring with stones, given its importance. They replied that nothing more could be done without causing harm. For if the wood that had lost its stony nature were removed, it would result in the sand in the spring clogging it up. The wood, no longer in contact with water, had already decayed, as I carefully observed during the 21 years it had grown. During the following winter, while staying in the same city, I discovered the surrounding marshes, now grown stronger, were never affected by the winter's cold. In addition, it is an indication that a peculiar such salt is present in that water, as it causes the stakes fixed in the swamps, on which a significant portion of the city's buildings rest or are supported, to gradually transform over a long period of time into pure stones and provide a solid foundation for the structures placed upon them. Based on all these indications, I have so far conjectured that all the sources around that city abound with such salt, which Paracelsus calls enixum, since throughout the winter season I have observed robust grasses in those swamps, a certain sign of this particular salt existing there. This conjecture is further supported by the aquatic animals, both in the spring and in the swamps near the city. Among these, there are quite a few water mice that cannot survive in any other waters. Additionally, there are an incredible number of turtles in the swamps, and gardens irrigated by the flowing water surrounding the city. It has reached the point where, although they are often enjoyed by the nobility, no clear account is given of them, and for this reason, any citizen or villager gathers them in large quantities, which are then thrown to the pigs or similar animals, as they contribute greatly to fattening the pigs. However, it is clear from this that aquatic mice and turtles enjoy such sweet waters that are tempered with some salt, who, in the morning, would gather abundant turtles from the meadows and pastures, with such water irrigated, where they wander through, searching for their sustenance in the form of grasses or other moist plants. In the evening, they do the same, after the sun's E5. They have the habit of exhaling vapors and returning to seek food. If they encounter anyone, they immediately retreat into the water. With an entrance to the water closed, they resemble the heads and tails of snakes, with 4 feet retracted and hidden under a very hard shell, which can hardly be broken by any stronger and heavier hammer. The locals prick them with a certain style, and when they sense it, they quickly protrude their heads and tails from the shell to be cut off with a knife. When their body is cooked, the shell opens by itself, from which the meat is extracted and purified. It is then prepared with butter, wine, and spices, not much different from veal in taste, and therefore considered among the delicacies for those who indulge in gourmet food. Indeed, I am convinced that such animals, when used in food, do not harm but rather benefit one's health, as they inhabit pure waters. These few things have been provided to me through my own experience regarding those waters in which wood is transformed into stone, not only wood but also the skin and bones of animals. I have also seen half of a loaf of bread turned into stone, from which anyone can deduce the effectiveness of the aforementioned style for fastening, about which there are still more things to be mentioned. This transformation of wood into stone gives rise to laughter among all those ignorant brothers, ridiculing and denying such marvels of nature with their ridiculous and base jests, and denying that any work of art imitates nature. Emulating the operation of fleeing from their efforts and the transformation of their bodies into solid and incombustible substances, any wood consumed by fire is destroyed, leaving nothing behind but a little ash, which, however, when soaked in such water and transformed into stone, retains its original form and cannot be consumed by any fire. This is an indisputable argument that brilliantly refutes those scoffers of the assay. Could the heads of vervins be refuted by any other argument or testimony? I say this for the purpose of making it easier for them to believe, so that they do not marvel so much when they hear in the following that some spirit of wine, when subjected to the operations of such water, can be transformed into solid and consistent salt, and can even change in fire. Since it is possible for a spirit of wine, which is volatile by nature, to change into solid and consistent salt through such transmutation, who will deny that a similar water can provide the same for volatile metals? And since such an operation, which seems impossible to everyone, should be demonstrated by its effects, it is worth mentioning briefly. It happened to me without seeking it, and I would not have believed it at the time, even if someone had seriously affirmed it to me. Paracelsus' salt of antimony, or my fixed salt, is endowed with such efficacy and virtue that it dissolves everything by fire. At that time, I had dissolved gold by a dry method, and I was about to flee from danger. I had intended to pour the fiery spirit of wine into a solution of gold, but by chance, I accidentally poured the spirit into a glass vessel containing dissolved gold, realizing my mistake after the infusion. Therefore, I buried the glass, and half a year later, I found a blood-red color in it. I filtered it through absorbent paper, and after purifying it in this way, I applied it to the glass to separate the spirit from the tincture by the heat of fire. However, I discovered that instead of the spirit, a tasteless phlegm had formed through evaporation over a long period of time. In reality, that salt had turned the spirit into a fixed spirit, coagulating it into a red salt, an extremely astonishing miracle. The same salt presented to me another experiment worthy of even greater admiration. I had received from a friend a glass vessel filled with citrus oil obtained from golden and yellow fruits through distillation. The oil had a strong odor, and in order to remove it, I wanted to add salt spirit. However, by accident, I poured my dissolved enox salt into it and completed the distillation by fire. It yielded a clear but very small amount of oil, hardly even half of its original volume. Therefore, after continuing with a stronger fire and seeing that nothing more was coming out, I stopped the process. The glass had cooled, and upon removing the sand, I found that all the remaining material in it had turned into black carbon. I then removed it and set it on fire using burning coals to see if any oil remained. But, as I said, when the wood was consumed, I found many ashes left behind, and it revealed to me the fixed nature of my salt. Further investigation into the operation through careful examinations uncovered many wonders and provided the opportunity to later designate it as sal mirabilis, marvelous salt. Others should delve into this matter with more thorough meditation, in order to penetrate its depths with a deeper understanding. One who cannot perceive the virtues of this salt is like an eagle who is deprived of its sharp eyes and cannot endure the direct rays of the sun, stumbling in the brightest light, while those with weaker eyes shine in the darkness. It is a remarkable fact that oil, so combustible, could be reduced to that state in just a few hours, burning and glowing like charcoal. Therefore, it should not seem strange to anyone that wood rich in oil, over a long period of time and with the assistance of this salt, can be transformed into stone. These chance discoveries presented to me astonishing revelations, and through diligent and accurate investigation, far more can be discovered by those who are studious in both art and wisdom. For the wise, these things should suffice. Next follows the theory demonstrating practice, explaining how this salt should be prepared and to what uses it should be applied, both in alchemy and medicine, as its incredible and wondrous effects can benefit both. On the preparation of miraculous salt. This miraculous salt of mine is prepared and separated from all common substances of the art. However, one, salt, is easier than the other. For not only culinary salt but also others like saltpeter, vitriol, and alum are suitable from which it may be extracted. Alum and vitriol possess many sulfurous and mineral qualities, and therefore, they present much difficulty and labor in separation. Saltpeter, on the other hand, already possesses the fugacious and ardent nature. Thus, we make these lesser salts and prepare miraculous salt from common salt used in kitchens, separating it by the action of fire and water, utilizing whatever is earthly, and prepared for the glory of God and the benefit and utility of our neighbor, as much as lies within our power. Regarding the external shape, color, taste, and odor of miraculous salt. This miraculous salt, when properly prepared, appears as ice when frozen and congealed, or like ice when it melts. It resembles crystals of rock salt that have congealed lengthwise, clear and transparent, similar to ice, if it has not been polished by the tongue. It possesses a taste that is neither sharp nor overly salty but slightly astringent to the tongue. When placed on burning coals, it does not emit any odor, and it does not catch fire like common salt or ignite like saltpeter. No other salt possesses these qualities. 2. On the external and internal use of my miraculous salt. From the beginning, it must be known that my miraculous salt conceals great powers, as it is not as sharp and acute as other salts, making it easily accepted for both internal and external use in medicine. When applied externally, it cleanses and heals all fresh wounds and open sores without corroding or causing pain, unlike other salts. When taken internally, it exhibits astonishing virtues within the body, especially when combined with substances whose powers it enhances, guiding them to the necessary areas. Salt is indeed the leader and regulator of many good and evil virtues, taking them along as it pleases, depending on their nature. Just as the nourishment of vegetables and minerals consists of salt, so too does the nourishment of animals. For if herbs, meat, bread, and all other things we consume were devoid of salt, the bodies of animals could not be sustained, nourished, and grown, for they would immediately face death and extinction. Therefore, as foods are properly and appropriately seasoned with salt, they also become nourishing. Indeed, anything lacking in flavor is unfit for nourishment, as common proverbs suggest. What tastes, nourishes, and what lacks taste, does not nourish. Thus, Almighty God has provided salt to all his creatures. God has given them salt as a means of nourishment and sustenance, so much so that it would not be necessary for the foods destined for human sustenance to be seasoned with salt, as they were already endowed with salt by nature, unless sin and corruption had to be averted. Therefore, to remedy what nature had endowed with less salt, they require the common and ordinary seasoning of common salt, provided by God for the purpose of supplying nourishment to the human body, strengthening it, and making it more effective. It is evident that bread, meat, and various vegetables, when eaten without salt, do not only lack flavor but also fail to provide nourishment. It is well known among the common people that salting meat, fish, and vegetables greatly enhances their ability to satisfy and nourish, compared to consuming these foods without salt. For this reason, those engaged in strenuous labor are offered bread, meat, fish, vegetables, and other foods liberally seasoned with salt to maintain the strength of their bodies. Conversely, those who do not engage in such labor are provided with foods that are not only less salty but also easier to digest. Therefore, salt is not only the nourishment of plants, animals, and minerals but also of everything that exists in the world. Hence, since it is evident that nothing can exist or live without salt, and the life of all things depends solely on salt, why do some consider salt to be of such little importance? The answer lies in the fact that very few truly understand the nature of salt. It is justifiably said that salt acts in the same way as a skilled driver or charioteer, for it carries and transports everything placed upon it to their destinations, be it good or bad, without any effort on its part, and it takes on the care of the burden it carries, from which it is exempt, whether it is a valuable or harmful load. Similarly, when salt is mixed with good things that provide nourishment, it enhances their ability to nourish, serving as the vehicle for nutrition, fortification, and assistance. When mixed with poisonous or harmful substances, salt strengthens the poison, increases its potency, and, with minimal harm to the body, permeates the limbs and tissues, which it would not have been able to do without salt. Therefore, it is good among the good and bad among the bad, and it serves both sides according to the choice of the good and the bad, as the common proverb goes, salt and wine sharpen the mind, provided they are used in moderation with good things. Likewise, it is said that the opposite is true, salt and wine dull the mind, which could be demonstrated with many examples if space allowed. However, for the sake of clarity, I will provide two reasons for explaining my speech. Firstly, it is said that if salt is added to substances containing good qualities and excellent nourishment, such as bread, meat, and vegetables, they become more suitable and effective for nourishment, as everyday experience, which no one will deny, confirms this belief. Why then is the opposite not true, that it makes the bad even worse and corrupts it more if it is associated with it? For example, common mercury is considered a poison of the common people, and indeed it is, being more or less poisonous depending on its preparation. If half an ounce of it were given to someone to swallow, it would have no effect on the body and would pass without harm. However, if sublimated and heightened in quality by its salts, and if a dose of 2, 3, or 4 grains were administered, it could rob someone of their life. In the same way, yellow orpiment, as it is extracted from mountains, is of no benefit in the human body. It causes unbearable vomiting and frequent and strong diarrhea when its dose is exceeded. Yet, if 1, 2, 3, or 4 grains of it are ingested, there is no danger, and it does not cause violent symptoms. However, when sublimated with common salt, it becomes such a harmful poison that it would undoubtedly deprive people of their lives if they were to ingest it. Similarly, when compared to white arsenic, which, due to its malicious reputation, is known to the common people, although the cause of its malice is known to only a few, as the mentioned examples provide clear and sufficient evidence of the truth. In order to accommodate the unlearned, I will provide one more example. Why, then, is the opposite not equally true, that it worsens and corrupts even more if associated with evil? For example, common mercury is considered a poison of the common people, and indeed it is, but its potency as a poison varies depending on the quality of its preparation. If a half ounce were to be swallowed by someone, it would have no effect on the body, and they would recover without harm. However, when mercury is sublimated with salts and elevated in quality, if a dose of 2, 3, or 4 grains were administered, it could indeed strip a person of their life. Similarly, orpiment, as it is extracted from mountains, has no beneficial effects on the human body. It induces unbearable vomiting and frequent and severe headaches if its dosage is exceeded. Yet, when 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 grains of the same substance are ingested, they induce vomiting without any danger, and the vomiting is rather mild and not violent. However, when this substance is elevated by common salt through sublimation, it becomes so poisonous that if consumed, it could deprive people of their lives. The same applies to white arsenic, which, when compared to sublimated salt, has gained notoriety for its malicious properties. Although few are aware of its malevolence, the examples I have mentioned provide clear and abundant evidence of its truth. In the interest of enlightening the unlearned, one more thing should be added. In the human body, however, gold possesses no virtues unless it insinuates its power into the membranes through the agency of salt and augments them. Someone may argue that since other metals exert their properties in the human body without the need for salt, why wouldn't gold do the same if it had any inherent properties? To this, I respond that the reason for this difference lies in the fact that other metals, when reduced to scoria or filings, act in the human body because of their vitriolated salt, which they retain when liquefied. This salt is more readily admitted into the stomach due to its natural acidity, and it performs its functions. In contrast, imperfect metals do nothing beneficial in the human body. Tin and copper bear witness to this, as wine preserved in their vessels overnight and consumed induces vomiting, colic pains, and palpitations of the heart, with copper being more prone to causing such incidents than tin, primarily because it is less frequently adulterated with bismuth, which is therefore considered pure. Ingested lead desiccates and excessively chills. The scoria and remnants of iron are transferred for medicinal use, particularly for killing and expelling worms in infants. Crocus is commonly mixed with its medicinal properties for astringent purposes. Silver, when filed and ingested, is of no use in the human body as it lacks the salt possessed by iron and copper. However, gold, when prepared with salt, gains access to the body's organs, purges and expels all harmful humors, and strengthens the brain. Nevertheless, gold, despite being noble, holds such a bitter taste, even more bitter than vitriol itself, that it is difficult to introduce it into the body. Gold is so bitter that it is rarely admitted for use, either when ingested or when administered in its finest powdered form. For the stomach's acidity is not strong enough to dissolve and process gold, as it does with copper and iron. Instead, it expels gold in the same form it received it. Hence, the ignorance of many arises from the audacious belief that gold, devoid of all virtues, is entirely useless in medical practice. This error is not philosophical but rather purely foolish, stemming from both ignorance and total lack of understanding. Indeed, experience testifies entirely to the contrary. One who believes gold to be entirely devoid of power will discover the opposite through a simple experiment. If they dissolve gold thoroughly with purified and rectified spirit of salt and then ingest this solution, whether slightly warmed and mixed with water, wine, or beer, they will swiftly experience its rapid and beneficial effects. It will expel all excess waste, as it encounters them, through vomiting, sweating, urine, or feces, all without any debilitation of the body's strength. F3. Clearly confirming this, as I briefly mentioned in my translation, titled The Comfort of Navigators. Due to the brevity of time, I was unable to delve further into this topic. However, I present here the solution of gold through spirit of salt in medicine, which may prove to be of great benefit, although it is not highly regarded due to its unpleasant taste. For when spirit of salt, which is used to dissolve gold, must be very strong, this corrosive liquor, without which gold cannot be dissolved, first causes the inconvenience of an unpleasant taste, blackening of the lips, and dulling of the teeth. Another issue is the large quantity of the liquor required for this solution, and over time, it may induce a sense of bitterness. Some may even find it too bitter to endure. Furthermore, with this solution, it is intended that the drinker be slightly inconvenienced during the process, as it works better this way. However, this inconvenience can be alleviated if the solution is mixed with wine or beer. For this reason, this remedy, by itself, of great significance, may prove difficult to administer. Since we have stated that gold without salts is entirely ineffective, the entire essence of its solution lies in such a menstruum that, while not corrosive or unpleasant, still opens up gold and makes it suitable to become an extremely valuable medicine. I have not found these qualities in any other substance except my miraculous salt, which is free from all corrosiveness and unpleasantness by itself. This medicine is the best, and it imparts a most pleasant sweetness to everything it dissolves. When it dissolves gold, it stains neither the lips nor the hands, unlike other solutions prepared with aqua regia or spirit of salt. Furthermore, like other solutions, it congeals, but it is admitted with pleasure and carries out its noble function. Therefore, with the same salt, I attempted many wonderful things, and finally, like a green herb, I produce the solution or rather the extraction of gold, the most healthful and noble medicine. For he who turned gold into green, a topic highly praised by many ancient philosophers, called it the blessed greenness. What this same greenness can accomplish in medicine is not the purpose here, as I have decided to discuss and confirm nothing in this place except that salt is the beginning and end of all things, and it increases and exalts the powers and virtues of all things. Since this is in accordance with the truth and cannot be refuted by anyone, it must also be conceded that a certain salt, such as mine, brought to the highest degree of purity, is far better and nobler than any coarse and impure salt, because it also amplifies and exalts the powers of all animals, vegetables, and minerals, and it can easily be provided that gold, the noblest of all creatures found in the earth, will be made even nobler if it is associated with the purest and noblest part of salt. F4. And it is said that the most noble medicine will emerge from it. For salt and gold, as if they were the sons of the sun, are as it were immortal and incorruptible, offering assistance to all mortal and corruptible things, and preserving them from all decay and corruption. However, I do not wish anyone to be persuaded here that I intend to offer immortality with my words. This is certainly not the aim of my proposal, for I am well aware that no herb can bring a cure to death. I have only intended to signify that the most excellent and supreme medicine will necessarily emerge from the association of salt and gold. If salt promotes and enhances the powers of other things, why would it not also promote and enhance the virtues of gold? Indeed, no herb is so base, no stone so cheap, no bone so contemptible that it does not possess its own inherent powers. Who, then, would deny that gold, as the most noble creature of God, after the sun and salt, from which it is born, should enjoy the possession of excellent and inferior creatures' gifts and virtues? Everyone, even the most ignorant rustic, understands that no harm can arise from two most excellent things, such as salt and gold. Why do those more refined and idle individuals not want to grasp and perceive this? Therefore, I believe that they should not be counted among the ignorant and uneducated if they acknowledge that such a great medicine exists in the nature of things, even though they may remain ignorant of the process. It would be better if such envy were, and they would not envy such gifts to others who are not laboring in vain, nor would they attack the innocent with so many foul slanders and insults, leaving behind what they perceive as surpassing their understanding. I now mention my green lion, the admirable virtues of which should be extolled and made manifest to the whole world. However, I know well that not fewer adversaries will be found for this green lion than for my white or red potable gold. Satan cannot tolerate anything being made known for the benefit and use of humankind, and he employs all tactics and powers to place obstacles in the way of the truth. Many arts have been devised to discredit my potable gold, especially by those who could not comprehend it. Such people could not swallow even a drop of my potable gold, even though they had requested it from me. And when they could not become possessors of it, they attempted to extort it from me under the pretext of being sick, not to serve the healthy but merely to seize an opportunity to despise it and stir up hatred among the sick, so they would not expect a return to their former health. Did they not convene and share their plans, with one proposing one method and another, to attack my potable gold by any means possible? But I leave this hatred and envy to the judgment of divine vengeance. Although many, F5, and they would try to obscure the sun with watery and dark clouds, and with its life-giving and warm rays cast shadows, but they would accomplish nothing. In the end, these clouds would disperse into vapors and vanish into fading mists, yielding their place to the solar rays. There is nothing that can extinguish the truth, for it may be suppressed but never completely overcome, just as light is never entirely extinguished at any time. The air, even when filled with numerous dark clouds, is never so laden that, in the end, the sun does not emerge from them and reveal itself. In the same way, truth ultimately frees itself from the snares of falsehood and emerges into the open. Therefore, I can boldly proclaim the truth, even though many may resent it. For one must obey God more than humans, and the benefits owed to the good should not be omitted for the sake of the wicked. In the name of my God, I continue to narrate the virtues of my miraculous salt. Since I have stated in the preceding text that salt is the universal remedy, leading the powers of all things, whether mixed or unmixed, to their proper places, it is advisable to associate not with harmful and poisonous substances but with the best ones, as far as possible. However, there is no creature under the sun nobler and more excellent than pure gold, which, without fearing the destruction of all elements, as we have said earlier, cannot make a person a participant in its virtues without true solution. And all solutions are found to be inept for its solution. Rightly and deservedly such a solution is required, which is accomplished without the aid of corrosive salts. Therefore, we will see such a solution in our hands, from which we can expect good. Regarding the use of my miraculous salt for both the solution of metals and the preparation of medicines. First, it must be noted that not only metals but also various stones, bones, and even coals themselves, which resist any corrosive salt solution, can be radically dissolved by my miraculous salt. Many of the substances dissolved, whether they are metallic, vegetal, or mineral in nature, acquire a green color, while some remain green, and others, with the passage of time, change into yellow or red hues. I could compile an extensive volume on this marvelous transformation and dissolution if my labor were not to be redirected elsewhere. Therefore, I will describe nothing else here but the dissolution of gold, as no better alternative can be found. The dissolutions of other metals I have found to be futile for preserving or restoring health when applied for internal use, as I mentioned a little earlier. However, salt and gold, the noblest subjects of all, from which the finest remedy for the preservation and restoration of health can be derived, this medicine must be prepared as necessary. For salt places the virtues and powers of all things in the highest degree of perfection and infuses them into the human body. This seems to me not unlike the volatile and fleeting spirit of plants, such as wine, beer, and so on, which, when entering the human body, adds vigor to the animal spirit, enabling it to move more promptly and briskly. Indeed, any other food or drink, whether it be bread or water, communicates some powers to the body, but not as potently and effectively as some noble wine, whose spirit is very pure, potent, and subtle. So much so that excessive consumption of it awakens and brings to light all hidden things within a person and reveals them openly. In the same way, salt strengthens, enhances, and, when combined with them, reveals all hidden powers that would otherwise remain in darkness without salt. Who among us would know how much arsenic is a hidden poison if salt did not reveal it? If a melancholic individual, naturally inclined to tranquility, desires something buried in his sleep, a spiritual wine or some other stronger drink awakens the melancholic humor buried in his sleep, and loosens his tongue. The same goes for salt, which adds vigor to all things, especially metals, making their properties clear and known. Indeed, without salt, few would be aware of the poisons hidden in various metals, as was mentioned earlier regarding arsenic and quicksilver. It has been said above, if this salt operates on harmful substances by expanding and augmenting their malignity, why wouldn't it also perform the same operation on good substances and enhance their goodness? Therefore, among the subjects derived from salt and gold, which are the noblest and most eminent, it would be wrong to pass over both and seek inferior ones for the preparation of the best medicine. Since, apart from wine, salt, and gold, there are no other substances that exhibit such excellent powers, we shall endeavor to prepare the noblest medicine from these processes. Recipe: take 3 or 4 parts of salt of mirabilis and 1 part of gold suitable for this operation. Mix them and put them into a strong glass retort, well sealed with clay. Place it over an open flame and gradually increase the heat until the glass becomes red hot. Intensify the flame and maintain it stronger for an hour continuously, and finally cease so that everything cools down. Remove the retort, free it from clay, or compress it in such a way that the clay adhering to the material does not mix with the glass. This pure glass must be accurately separated from the retort and introduced into the pure glassware along with those substances which have been elevated through sublimation from the neck of the retort. The greenish color is poured onto a flat surface, like falling rainwater, so that it dissolves with gentle heat, and the salt mixes with a portion of gold with water. Pass this greenish liquid through absorbent paper, and extract a portion of it with the help of distillation, so that the greenish liquor remains, not striking the tongue with a sharp taste, nor corroding it, nor causing excessive urination, but suitable for consumption with all vehicles. You will find gold not dissolved by onyx salt after the solution, and you will use it again for similar work. You can soon use the greenish liquor, which will be very useful in both medicine and alchemy. Anyone who wants to extract all the phlegm down to the green salt and extract the salt itself by the spirit of wine alkasate will become the composer of a more effective medicine. By extracting not the green but the red color, and making a very pleasant solution. The spirit of wine renders the golden virtues more effective and more easily incorporates them into the limbs of the human body. Note here that onyx salt soaks up not the entire mass of gold, but only its purest part when dissolved. If, by means of the spirit of wine, you have already extracted whatever is pure from the same pure mass once, you will undoubtedly obtain the most noble medicine, which no one will refute, even if they are a capital enemy of the truth. This is the operation that is no less concise than true, from gold, salt, and wine, the supreme preparation of the medicine, rightly and deservedly named the potable gold, whose greatest virtues and powers need to be manifest to the needy sick. Of the virtues and powers off me green lion, the sun's vitriol, and the miraculous gold salt, etc. The green lion and the gold maker's liquid can be safely and pleasantly used by everyone, whether old or young, sick or healthy, as it contains nothing harmful or damaging. Purified salt and gold, wherever they come from, exercise their beneficial effects and powers in both plants and animals, whether vegetable, animal, or mineral, as will be clearly demonstrated in the following. Firstly, this green liquid, when applied externally, invigorates the heart, brain, and all vital spirits. Indeed, among all colors, none surpasses green in delight, as witnessed by all people. After enduring the intense cold of the harshest winter, they see the rejuvenation of the lifeless trees and plants in the springtime, and they feel their whole body languor being renewed and, as it were, revived with great pleasure. Secondly, this golden liquid, when ingested, strengthens and fortifies the entire body's moisture, stomach, brain, and all internal parts, more than any other known remedies. It also dispels melancholy, relieves excessive anxiety, alleviates palpitations of the heart, opens obstructions in the internal vessels, heals injured internal parts such as the liver and lungs, and provides a remedy for anyone afflicted with kidney stones or bladder stones. It promotes the natural function of the bowels, expels winds accompanied by colic pain, safeguards the blood from corruption, cures leprosy, scabies, and all kinds of fevers. It consumes the progress of gouty afflictions, provides immediate relief from apoplectic and epileptic seizures, purifies tainted blood, preserves and delivers people from highly contagious diseases, defends and removes internal ulcers in the lungs, liver, and other parts, and deeply eradicates ulcers that have already developed. It tinges all the internal parts of the human body with its balsamic virtue, allowing those not easily susceptible to disease to enjoy a healthy and long life. When applied externally, it heals all recent wounds as well as long-standing and open ulcers, without the need for any other plasters or ointments. For in the treatment of such ulcers, there is nothing among all animals, vegetables, and minerals that responds so powerfully to gold with its own properties, to the extent that it even cures internal hernias. Such is the nature and property of gold that it most powerfully removes all impurities. Moreover, it also constricts, which are the two things necessary for healing in all ulcers. This salt, with its assistance, is readily available and wonderfully enhances the virtues of gold. Above all, the liquid cures mouth and throat ulcers, which hardly admit the help of other remedies, and rapidly removes their scabrous infection, even if the tongue, uvula, and the entire palate are covered with pustules. In summary, I consider no other remedy superior to this liquid for the removal of all internal and external ulcers, and for the sake of brevity, I will not elaborate on its efficacy in curing various other bodily ailments. Furthermore, this green liquid and aurific liquid possess a nature and properties that surpass all other remedies in conferring miraculous fertility to all things, as the unmistakable signature itself, the green color, and various experiments have verifiably proven. Hence, when the seeds of all plants are soaked in this liquid and then sown in pure sand, they produce golden shoots and plants that are much stronger, more pleasant in appearance, of a more beautiful color, and greater in height than those born from fertile soil. This green liquid is used to nourish and make all fertile and green vegetables grow, taking the foremost place in promoting fertility and preserving it among all remedies. I have known and observed this remedy to hold a place of the utmost importance. Indeed, it provides the greatest aid and comfort in all human diseases and works beyond belief to assist both the fertility of men and women. It is also a great incentive for Venus, not only among those with gentle inclinations, where Venus is often intermitted among younger wives, but also among men in their prime and the barren, hence lacking heirs. It brings the greatest consolation. I do not write this in vain but from experience, for I have seen certain husbands so strengthened by this remedy that they have never appeared feeble to themselves, and some women have also experienced this. However, such remedies should not be administered too frequently to those of weaker disposition, as they can sometimes provoke itching that is more severe than is appropriate. It is administered more safely to the elderly, as it does not cause them any harm whatsoever. These teachings should not seem surprising to anyone, as they have certain and undeniable causes of their operations. Let us consider the two substances that compose the green lion, namely salt and gold. They are excellent and necessary for the generation of all things. Can any herb grow without seed and salt? Not even the smallest. For if the earth or sand lacks salt, the seed of the herb cannot have nourishment and cannot grow. Indeed, even if the seed itself were placed in very fertile soil, it still cannot grow without the warm solar rays. I have known and observed this remedy to hold a place of the utmost importance. Indeed, it provides the greatest aid and comfort in all human diseases and works beyond belief to assist both the fertility of men and women. It is also a great incentive for Venus, not only among those with gentle inclinations, where Venus is often intermittent among younger wives, but also among men in their prime and the barren, hence lacking heirs. It brings the greatest consolation. I do not write this in vain but from experience, for I have seen certain husbands so strengthened by this remedy that they have never appeared feeble to themselves, and some women have also experienced this. However, such remedies should not be administered too frequently to those of weaker disposition, as they can sometimes provoke itching that is more severe than is appropriate. It is administered more safely to the elderly, as it does not cause them any harm whatsoever. These teachings should not seem surprising to anyone, as they have certain and undeniable causes of their operations. Let us consider the two substances that compose the green lion, namely salt and gold. They are excellent and necessary for the generation of all things. Can any herb grow without seed and salt? Not even the smallest. For if the earth or sand lacks salt, the seed of the herb cannot have nourishment and cannot grow. Indeed, even if the seed itself were placed in very fertile soil, it still cannot grow without the warm solar rays. G2. Animals, vegetables, and minerals derive their origin solely from salt and the sun, and water serves as their aid. Therefore, since my golden elixir is composed of such subjects, it can operate nothing but fertility. Hence, adorned by that most beautiful greenness bestowed by nature, it signifies its innate ability to render all things fertile. God adorns nothing in vain with his known signs, from which the virtues and powers of all things are more clearly seen than from books. For the signature by which things are distinguished by God and nature never errs, whereas books and writings, often patched together by men accustomed to error, frequently err. Why did the ancient philosophers and poets worship Venus as the goddess of love and generation, attributing to her offspring the most beautiful greenness generated from the sea? What else is foam from the sea on the shore, if not salt, dried by the heat of the sun and turned into salt? Poets, especially Virgil and Ovid, the most learned men to whom all of nature was revealed, would not have elaborated on such matters with such lengthy circumlocutions unless they wished to reveal this great mystery of philosophy to the world through their fables. Therefore, I firmly affirm that this green liquid is the principal remedy for the augmentation of all things, just as its most beautiful greenness testifies with unfailing experience. Oceanus, the mother of all fertility, also displays its greenness, especially in those places where the sea is rich in salt and fiercely beaten by the strongest waves. This is well known among sailors, who soon discern it by the change in the color of the water, indicating their approach to warmer regions where the sun casts its hottest rays. In such places, the sea is so salty that it shines and sparkles like fire. The urine of those on board, when thrown into the sea, scatters like fiery sparks. It is said that 1 part of water contains 1 part of salt. The Mediterranean Sea contains less salt than the area between Spain and France. Indeed, there is a considerable difference in this very thing, for Spanish salt is stronger than Gallic salt, and the ocean itself has less salt the farther north it extends. For this reason, the people of Denmark, Sweden, and other northern lands, although they have an abundance of seawater, do not produce salt from it but import it from Spain or Gaul. This is a clear and sufficient indication that salt is produced from seawater by the intense rays of the sun and is the cause of universal fertility. This is indicated by the German name for the sea, Meer, which is the same as if you were to savor Meer, i.e., To increase and enlarge. The name itself. G3. The name itself is most fitting for the thing, for without the sea, nothing at all on the earth is increased and enlarged. All creatures live and grow by the opposite process, shrinking and diminishing without the sea. Hence, it is clear that the color green is the emblem and sign of all fertility. This could be demonstrated with countless examples, but it is unnecessary here to avoid prolixity, as the thing itself can be seen and touched with one's own hands. For the sake of refuting those who might claim that green color does not come from gold but from copper, in order to lead the upright astray from the truth, since gold seems to them not to have any use in medicine, they have brought up this objection earlier. In order to counter their impure mouths and such frivolous objections, I declare that indeed copper among metals does have a green color if it is dissolved by strong acids and other corrosive liquids. However, gold, when dissolved in the same way, exhibits a yellow and not a green color, which is well known to those with jaundice and to barbers. But who would think me so stupid and foolish as to want to deceive anyone with such an obvious fraud? Who could even attempt to conceal such a fraud? Copper itself, when dissolved in false waters, would immediately reveal the deception with its foul and nauseating taste, and with vitriol, of which even a single drop swallowed would induce violent vomiting. It would not be a remedy but rather a poison. Furthermore, if you were to immerse a knife in such a solution, it would soon become coated with copper, showing that it is made of copper. On the contrary, the opposite happens if some pure iron is immersed in my green lion. Soon it will appear gilded, with a more outstanding and beautiful gold color than that exhibited by a ducat or any other gold coin. If a piece of iron or an iron nail is left in it for a certain period, it would eventually be transformed into good and pure gold, which is indisputably evident, proving that it does not originate from copper but from gold. Again, one could object that the common solution of gold in aqua regia also tinges iron with a golden color and adheres to it, which would not be surprising to anyone, as it is the most common and well-known fact. I respond that such a solution does not color iron green but rather yellow through precipitation, and it does adhere to the iron and dissolve it into a powder but does not penetrate it, preserving its original form. Thus, my green lion should not be classified with those common corrosive solutions. Instead, you can rightfully and deservedly call it the extractor through salt eximo. Its nature is that of miraculous salt, as it does not fully dissolve fine gold powder or chalk but extracts only what is purest, leaving the rest as black powder like residue. The solution itself is not corrosive, as it would otherwise corrode iron, dissolve it, not impart a complete gold color to it, and bring it to the same degree. Similarly, the green copper solution, made with common corrosive waters, associates itself with iron in a green color, corrodes it, and leaves behind a residue of copper. However, if copper is dissolved in my miraculous salt, that solution does not penetrate iron but transforms the entire iron into its own form, not instantly but over a longer period. From all these observations, it can be seen that there is a significant difference between common solutions of gold, copper, and other metals that are corrosive, and mine, which is entirely free from corrosion and is said to dissolve metal bodies in a far different manner than those corrosive solutions. Therefore, it should not be classified among the common solutions, as it possesses much greater power. The ordinary solution of gold made with aqua regia is harmful to all things like poison. If a small amount of it is poured on any vegetable seed, it would deprive it of all ability to grow and completely kill it. If a few drops of it were ingested by a human, it would corrode their stomach and throat. Unpolished metal, when treated with such a corrosive and corroding solution, would be converted into a powder. That solution, which can be safely administered to someone after the spirit of salt has been removed, can be mixed with water in whatever quantity is sufficient. However, it is not bitter, it does not constrict the tongue or stain the hands. This is not the case with my green liquid, which neither constricts the hands nor the tongue, nor is it astringent, nor does it corrode the seeds of plants. On the contrary, it stimulates fertility, as has been proven by the results achieved with my miraculous salt in the same solution. From this, it is clear that my miraculous salt is not corrosive but, by itself, the best remedy for all animals, plants, and minerals, as evidenced by direct experience. It is impossible for it to produce anything other than good, as it is prepared without any corrosive substances and is beautifully adorned with a green color before our eyes. This signature is an undeniable indication of the extraordinary virtues it possesses, capable of making all living, green, and fertile things, hidden within their innermost being. I believe that I have sufficiently addressed the foolish and absurd objections of those ignorant detractors who could attack me, and I am content with that. Everything that I have attributed to my green lion also applies to my red potable gold, which is extracted with spirit of wine, both in plants and animals, as well as minerals. For the spirit of wine can harm none of them but, rather, it imparts the virtues of gold to them as quickly as possible and makes them more effective. However, this discussion of gold and its efficacy and operation through my miraculous salt suffices for the present. G5. As for the dissolution of other metals, there is no need to mention them in extensive detail or write a lengthy volume, as one can easily deduce from the foregoing that such solutions, aided by the miraculous salt, are far superior to those corrosive ones. Vitriols prepared with the miraculous salt do not harm plants, as common vitriol does, which is harmful to all. In fact, vitriol made with the miraculous salt remarkably enhances the growth ability of plants, to the extent that lunar, Venusian, martial, jovial, mercurial, and saturnine herbs can be cultivated, serving as agents of extraordinary effects. This is especially true if the vegetative and growth properties of lunar herbs are augmented and promoted with lunar salt, Venusian herbs with Venusian salt, martial herbs with martial salt, jovial herbs with jovial salt, saturnine herbs with saturnine salt, and mercurial herbs with mercurial salt. Enough has been said for the wise. However, those who cannot grasp it with their understanding are unworthy, and it is beneath them to be offered such precious secrets. Based on this foundation, a diligent physician can discover various methods of healing and prepare medicines that could bring him honors and wealth. For many years, I have observed which plants can reveal their powers and virtues to him. If they were to grow from the reddish Martian soil, their qualities and properties, although not originally Martian, would indeed be of a solar, lunar, Venusian, Jovian, mercurial, or saturnine nature. Furthermore, imagine how the inherent nature and properties of plants could be strengthened and enhanced if they were not nourished by animal dung but were instead irrigated with pure sand and soaked in the miraculous salt infused with the virtues of metals. These herbs would possess entirely different powers and virtues, as well as colors, scents, and flavors, far surpassing the common ones that are typically nourished by animal manure and ordinary soil. Through this method, the seeds of these combined herbs could possess such a strong attractive force that they would draw in the magnetic astral influences and virtues, enhancing their own powers to the point where they could cure all diseases without any further preparation, leaving people in awe. N.B. It would be necessary for someone to have a deep understanding of the nature of these herbs, so that they could use the salt of the sun for the growth and increase of solar herbs, the salt of the moon for lunar herbs, the salt of Jupiter for jovial herbs, the salt of Venus for Venusian herbs, etc., without mixing everything together indiscriminately, which would undoubtedly hinder the expected progress. Consider these matters carefully, for they contain the greatest secrets, hidden away from a corrupted world that does not wish to reveal them. To the wise, I say, I add nothing more. However, I have no doubt that the revelation of my miraculous salt will be well received by diligent physicians in due course and will bring so much benefit that many more good things will yet be achieved for the sake of healing and curing the sick. Everything has its time, just like this secret, which will be in force at its own time. However, I do not wish anyone to be persuaded that I will immediately disclose the preparation of my miraculous salt. Pearls are not to be thrown to ungrateful swine, but I will reserve them for friends, and so, I will not open a window for my detractors and ignorant mockers to slander and calumniate me by suggesting that I am ignorant and unskilled in the preparation of such salt. I have decided to entrust small portions of not only my own salt but also the salts of those who are already imbued with the virtues of gold, silver, and other metals, to various wise individuals so that they can provide clear evidence of the truth at all times. I will also make the metallic herbs themselves available for examination and display. Therefore, no one should expect me to attend to their business or request my miraculous salt and other remedies, unless they are known to me and are close associates. Let heartfelt thanks be given to Almighty God, who has made this unworthy participant in such great things present in the world. I sought, and I have shown the way to others. Let others also seek and follow the path shown, so that by diligently following my footsteps, they may more easily attain the greater light of nature. To leave nothing out of what pertains to good instruction and knowledge, and to the glory and honor of salt, I will add one more infallible testimony, which will be made evident to even the most ignorant. The essence of fertility lies in salt alone, and it is the most precious treasure for the well-being of the entire world, and to acquire great wealth from it. Indeed, fertility itself has already been demonstrated in many previous testimonies. But since the story of the prophet Elisha coincidentally aligns with what I have just said and can serve as a splendid testimony, I deemed it worthwhile to include it here. In the book of 2 Kings, chapter 2, these words are found. And the men of the city said to Elisha, Behold, I pray you, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord sees, but the water is bad, and the land is barren. And he said, Bring me a new bowl, and put salt in it. So they brought it to him. Then he went to the spring of water and threw salt in it, saying, Thus says the Lord, I have healed this water. From now on neither death nor miscarriage shall come from it. So the water has been healed to this day, according to the word that Elisha spoke. To better understand this great mystery, it is necessary to first consider the actual story, from which it will be clear how the salt of Elisha became so potent that it expelled death and made the water good, turning the barren land fertile. When it was time for Elijah to ascend to heaven, Elisha said to him, Please let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. Elijah replied, You have asked a hard thing. Yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so. Now, when they had crossed over, and Elijah was still speaking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them. Then Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, My father, my father. Why the condition that if Elisha saw Elijah being taken away, he would obtain his request, but not otherwise. Couldn't Elijah have granted Elisha's request at his own discretion, perhaps very easily? However, Elijah did not wish to do this without some intermediary, because Elisha was to be doubly blessed first by the celestial fire that separated him from Elijah, and second by Elijah himself. For fire produces salt, celestial fire celestial salt, and elemental fire elemental salt. This fire, which separated Elijah from Elisha, was celestial fire, operating celestial salt in Elisha, and indeed so vigorously that, through his faith, it banished death and made the waters good, and rendered the land fertile. Undoubtedly, a mere full bucket of salt on the earth's surface would not have turned such a vast area fertile unless divine virtue, or divine salt, had been present in such abundance and had performed this miracle. In the very act, he used salt as a kind of intermediary, imitating Elijah, who used fire. This pious prophet Elisha was thoroughly seasoned and preserved with celestial salt from his master, the prophet Elijah, just as he was seasoned by celestial fire, even to the deepest part of his being, which, if not sprinkled with divine salt, would not have revived the deceased, whom he had touched, from death. Without salt, there is no life. Salt conquers death, as we have taught above. Therefore, Christ, born of pure divine salt and divine fire, while still walking among the living, raised so many dead, and after his own death, he revives all those who believe in him, seeking his divine salt and desiring to taste it. He preserves them all from eternal death. In this story, the eternal, divine, and natural light is placed before our eyes, even though both are perceived by only a few. Because their hearts are obscured and hardened by a dreadful blindness, both the Old and New Testaments are filled with such mysteries, so I dare to assert that all the treasures of souls and bodies can be found in Holy Scripture, without the need for the teachings of the philosophers of any ethnic group, if we are willing to seek them. However, we must add this one thing. It is the work of God alone to open the eyes of those who must and desire to know divine and natural mysteries, for without divine illumination, candles are buried in darkness and dead. This truth dispels all the mocking and slander of all jugglers and agitators of the devil. Will anyone oppose them and seek fertility from a source other than salt? Indeed, I believe that unless these most profligate individuals, who are plagued by their own destructive passions and wish to corrupt everything, want to establish that salt does not make things fertile, but rather makes them saltier, even though the opposite is true, and this should not be accepted. How disgracefully these brothers of the donkey expose themselves to the most evident truth, which can be felt even by their own hands. I hope that their impure and shameless mouths, which are wide open, will be overwhelmed by the stench of their lies. Therefore, I acquiesce in this demonstration, which I believe clearly proves that salt and the sun are the most noble creations of God, and salt, in particular, deserves to be called the greatest treasure of the world and the greatest wealth, for in earthly terms, nothing is more desirable than fertility. The origin of all fertility is salt, and the origin of salt is the sun, and the sun is God, the creator of all things, to whose name be honor and glory forever. Amen. However, even though this demonstration, which is evident and beyond all doubt, shows that salt is the greatest treasure in the world, it will not satisfy the greedy, who will say, "Where is the philosopher's stone, which we have eagerly awaited as the greatest treasure of the entire world, so that knowing and acquiring it, we can lead a prosperous life?" But I ask them to wait a little longer until someone comes and rewards these patrician gluttons with their due. Do you think that if I were its possessor, I would describe such a great mystery in such clear words, just as I describe the fertility of the earth? Certainly not, nor can I do that, since no man can give what belongs not to him, but to God. Nevertheless, so that a pious inquirer of truth may be introduced to such an important work by some hint, I could not help but, through divine grace, kindle a small light for myself, which I will set up openly, if, of course, he does not have his own eyes and rejects the light of nature, avoiding its radiance and not bearing it. If he lacks this, he cannot help but open his eyes to the truth, see it, and have faith in it. I am about to bearing it. If he lacks this, he cannot help but open his eyes to the truth, see it, and have faith in it. I am about to demonstrate this great work. However, regarding this great work, my opinion is that it can certainly be done, and the noblest pearl, namely the universal medicine and the philosopher's stone, which restores the bodies of men and metals to their pristine health, can be prepared from common salt. I cannot assert anything definite about the preparation, as it is unknown to me. I believe it is possible, as multiple and infallible experiments have convinced me of its feasibility. I possess and guard this knowledge, and I do not allow anyone to take it from me, even though I would willingly share it with those of good intentions if I could or dared to do so. However, since faith comes only from God, it must also be sought from him and not expected from men. Therefore, I will stand by my promise to demonstrate that the philosopher's stone can also be obtained from salt by the art of alchemy. I humbly request those who are devoted to the study of divine mysteries to investigate in my recent writings what I have mentioned about the fish echinide, by whose touch a miraculous extraction of salt from the sea can be accomplished. There, they will find sufficient information, and there is no need for me to elaborate further on this. These are the things I wanted to add in honor of the most noble salt. I cannot provide assistance to those who do not believe that the most noble pearl of universal and specific medicine is enclosed in the innermost sanctuary of salt. Everyone is free to seek and pursue another path. If it were not too long, I could even prove conclusively that from those marine bodies, such as corals, mother of pearls, shells, snail shells, and similar ones, if they are dissolved in water and then precipitated, one can extract bodily gold. I have done it with my own hands and can vouch for it. However, I withdraw my hand from the tablet, as these slender fingers are sufficient for now, from which I hope and trust that others will achieve and grasp something good. To all those devoted and pious individuals, I sincerely pray for divine blessings. Amen. Finis.